going to be completely understood by, a guy who also speaks Joual from Saguenay. There's a lot of regional variation.
Or from New Brunswick.
Oh, yeah.
Or from
Gaspé. The guy who speaks Gaspésie.
Oh, yeah.
Forget it. But nobody in Quebec understands Gaspésie.
Right.
So
it's like the Newfoundland of Quebec.
it's so there's a lot of variation in there.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, as a Canadian, I always thought that we should have been teaching Canadian French. But I suspect that the reason why, particularly in Western Canada, that we embraced metropolitan French so much was pushback against the mandatory nature of bilingualism in the 1970s.
think so?
Absolutely.
My impression is it's just like it's like when you learn English, you're learning the Queen's English, technically.
Well, it depends.
Right?
It depends.
That's kind of the model.
Some
it's
countries
the background
prefer
that
teach American English.
But it's all the same thing, right? The same grammar rules are there for all of them, aside from the letter U and
spelling changes,
and the order of R and E in certain words, right? But the basics are all there.
With formal proper English, the grammar does not change until you get into dialect. Then grammar changes massively. But that's the same with every language in the world.
Exactly, and that was going to be my point. Having experienced both, my experience learning French originally in Montreal. Mm-hmm. And my experience of learning French
in Ottawa with metropolitan French
were no different, right? It really just came down to the accent, right? Still does, right? Now, if I do speak French, I've got this pretentious, fucking Parisian accent.
Qu'est-ce que tu fais ici, as compared to qu'est-ce que tu fais ici, tabarnak?
Eh ben, je parle comme ça, quoi. Anyways, so I was listening to the radio yesterday, and they were talking about how they were comparing the youth of today, and it was stats coming out of the U.S. and the U.K. Compared to the youth of the 60s and 70s and the sexual revolution. And it was basically the comparison of, so nowadays sexuality is everywhere. Online, right? Yeah, and it's just infused everywhere. And so, in a lot of ways, the youth of today are completely sexualized, right? But the interesting stat was, back in say 1970, late 70s, out of the UK and the US, the stats are that people lost their virginity. In high school. I read
that as well. That it's
right?
The age of first sexual activity is getting pushed later and later.
Yeah. So back then, I mean, I can't remember I didn't catch the stat, but the way the conversation went, it was significantly higher back in the days of the sexual revolution.
Yeah.
People had lost their virginity in high school, or university.
Yeah.
Probably somewhere upwards of 70%. Nowadays, it's 40%.
Yeah.
Right. Which fits this graph that I'm looking at right now. Very interesting, because the people from the sexual revolution would be on that bottom line there in the 65 plus.
Yes, it would.
Right?
Yeah, the
whereas
baby boomers.
Today's are all up there. So again, it's who are you hooking up with? Well, for the 65 and olders, when they were hooking up with strangers.
Well, yeah, and they met. I remember a comment from a film, a movie about where a guy made a comment about the 1970s, where the character said that the 1970s was a decade where he's speaking of signals culture and the sexual revolution, so where the entire country had the morality of two dogs in a park. It was the age before Me Too. It was the age of the workplace was a place you went to meet the opposite sex. I remember in junior high, I was in grade 7. So definitely in the 80s, mid to early 80s. I remember, again, this is just, when you look at the lexicon, how much our culture has changed. I remember the social studies teacher explaining our work experience program that they had just brought in, and this was going to be a trial balloon, and we were going to do it for the first time, and he was trying to pitch it to the kids. where, okay, you go off into a workplace and you're going to work in the administrative capacity for some credit, like 1 or 2 days a week. And he said, part of this training is that you're going to have to dress in a professional manner. You're going to have to wear office, like business kind of clothing. And I'm not lying to you. This was straight up, dead serious, part of the conversation, that part of their education was that the girls were going to have to learn to be how to be hit on. In that these teenage girls are going to be dressing professionally. It will not be immediately apparent to their male coworkers that they are actually 16 and say not 22. And the language he used, you're going to love how archaic this is someone's going to make a pass at them. And they're going to have to learn how to take a pass. When was the last time you heard that phrase?
Well, I never heard it because...
I mean, it was...
Because I'm a guy.
It was common in the 1980s, like you remember...
I'm not saying I doubt you. I'm just saying I never heard it.
And just...
Because I was a guy. But
within the last 10 years, like it's just dropped out of the lexicon completely. If I went to a 21-year-old and I said, hey, has anyone ever taken a pass at you? She'd probably say, no, I don't play tackle football. No, I don't play sports. It'd be completely contextually unknown. But the fact that my social studies teacher in 1984 believed in good faith that this is a part of your necessary education is learning how to deal with sexual harassment says something about how dating was done at the time. The singles bar.
Yeah.
You went to a bar for the purpose of picking someone up or being picked up. It was a singles mixer. It kind of replaced the dance, the community dance of the 1950s and 60s. So yeah, it was very common that you went to a place where singles were going to be, and that's where you met. We've removed that from our society now.
Well, I think if we go down that rabbit hole, we've removed and we've altered the context around a lot of those things.
Totally. Yeah,
I was first when you first brought this up, where my mind went was, in a lot of ways, since schooling is considered on top of the educational side of things, it's also social conditioning. It's learning how to interact with others. Yep. It's creating its own mini society, and it's okay. This is how you learn how to behave in society in larger groups.
Yes,
right. Including socialization. We're talking about friends.
Yep.
And once you get to junior high and high school,
the only function of public education. Like it should be, but it kind of is. That's the only real thing that kids are learning now in K to 12 is socialization, how to interact with peers, how to get along with people, how to conflict resolve. These important social questions. Absolutely, it's essential.
Well, I don't think they're even learning that well anymore anyways. But by extension, since you're learning those things, the social aspect in school, including by junior high and high school, the courtship rituals and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
And all of that's still setting you up for adulthood and the workplace. It's not all that surprising. Like, to me, I'm not tying this together with what you said. This is just, I think, a natural expectation. Like, you get out there and there becomes the possibility of courtship.
Yeah.
And that the exposure to the opposite sex or whoever is, whoever takes your fancy, right? And so certainly, sexual harassment has rightfully been
absolutely. No one's defending that.
Been brought to bear,
yeah,
right. But it's.
I just find it remarkable about how much society put up with back then. Like, it's remarkable that it took so long to make these changes.
Oh, I mean, if we talk to our mothers, we just or just remember the behavior around us or some of the behavior we had,
even our peer group. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When I talk to women in my age cohort, some of the stuff that they put up with in the earlier years just absolutely blows me away.
Like, for me, the thing is, like, when I started to realize, hey, I don't know. There's when you're a young guy, like every woman you meet, it doesn't matter the context, is a potential romantic interest. And at some point, you realize, oh shit, I'm a 40-something bald fat guy. Nobody fucking.
I remember having this discussion.
Right? Like there's just
Technically, scientifically, theoretically,
Yeah.
the statement still holds true that person is a potential sexual partner.
Yes, but
Right.
you know what he means though. Like when we're in our 20s, every gal you lay your eyes upon, there's an instant switch that goes in your head in the first 3 seconds. Yes or no? Could I, or couldn't I, or like would I, or would I not?
Yeah.
And then you arrange your behavior based on that decision.
Yeah.
Is this someone who I am initially, like I make that decision in the first, say, 3 seconds. Do I find this person attractive? And that will influence my behavior. Will I be flirty? Will I make myself more interesting? Will I be more engaging?
Yeah.
If the decision is no, I don't find this person attractive, then it's about the transaction. It's about the objective of why you're there. This is what I need. This is what I want. I'm going to seek to get that, and then I'm going to leave.
But I think,
Dog, what are you doing?
But I think the assumption on the guy's perspective was always that the guy that you were attracted.
Oh yeah, well,
Right?
I mean,
like that it wasn't a question of whether she would say yes or no. Or I mean, there was always that question.
They keep trying to walk in front of me. I don't know why.
That's
For the people listening, we got a couple of dogs as our special guests, and they're annoying the hell out of me.
The podcast has gone to the dogs.
Yeah, the podcast has gone to the dogs.
I mean, you're right. As a guy, especially back in those days,
Right.
at that age, in those days,
Yep.
I think it. Well, I can't speak for those who identify as men these days or as males these days, but as kind of a humorous philosophical aside, someone came up with recently. It fits exactly into what you just said. Yes or no.
Yeah.
Right. There was it came out. I'm not gonna name names, right? But it's like this whole bullshit of rating sexual partners in terms of looks on a 1 to 10 scale. Absolute bullshit. It's completely binary, zeros and ones.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You know?
They're actually, that's...
When you boil it down.
There's another podcast I listened to...
when you boil it down.
Called The Red Scare.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of... They're conservative-ish chicks.
Yeah.
But when they talk about guys, it's completely... It's the 0 or 1 on the binary.
0 to 1.
Yeah.
0 to 1, yeah. And that's what they call it. They literally call it the binary.
Yeah.
It's...
I get it.
Wouldn't you?
Mind you, I think there's... and that makes sense when you look at other stats that we're seeing today. The one good thing about internet dating and dating apps is it has been a treasure trove of data for social scientists.
Oh, no doubt.
Whereas in the past, when we wanted to know about people's sexual behavior, we had to rely on self-reporting. We had to ask them, what do you do? What do you prefer? What is your ambition? And we had to hope they were telling us the truth. And they almost never were. When it comes to that kind of intimate behavior, people tell what I call aspirational lies. If you ask me, what kind of women am I attracted to? I'm probably not going to tell you the truth. I am going to tell you what I think my peer group would want me to answer. Or the people I admire and respect, I'm trying to imagine what would they want me to find attractive. And that's what I'm going to say. And then who I actually pursue in my off time is a completely different matter. And dating apps have allowed us to cleave away that aspirational untruth and get to the reality of it. We can actually see what body types, male and female, get the most messages. We can actually see what kind of personality traits based on what you put in your profile, this sort of thing. We can actually measure these things now. And it's completely revolutionized our understanding of human dating behavior. Because we're getting away from the people saying, I guess the answer is we're getting what they actually do, not what they say they do.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference.
Well, I would say, from what I know of the dating sites these days, I guess, what is it? Tinder is the big one.
The big one, I believe.
Now that's where you swipe left, swipe right.
Yeah.
I compare that.
It's literally the binary.
Yeah.
Right?
So and that's based purely on a picture, right?
Yeah, purely.
I compare that to.
Can I throw this at you? Is not the singles bar based purely on a picture?
Yes.
I'm gonna argue no.
And all that stuff, right?
Yeah, you're choosing who to approach purely on their physical appearance.
There's another aspect to that, and this is something I've learned along the way, and I think we've discussed it in another context before. It's not just looks.
It's not.
It's approachability.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, but again, looks dictates your initial interest.
That's true.
Yeah.
But part of what can play
So
into this...
I don't think Tinder is that artificial. It's artificial, but not extremely
Well,
so.
bear with me here. Man, we're all over the place here. But, to me, you're right to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I compare it to... So when my wife and I split up back in 2006, right? Within a year, I was on...
Back on, yeah.
I was on a whole bunch of dating sites, right?
Yeah.
And they were not like this, right? To me, this is quote unquote too easy, right? Because it's like you swipe left, you swipe right, my understanding. And if someone swipes you in the agreeable way, then you're notified, and then
you can actually send a message.
And then you either say yes or no.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like 25% of the time, these two people are going to agree.
Right.
Right?
Well, that's pretty generous, but...
Right? Well, one says yes, the other one says yes. Right?
Yeah,
so
but I think...
there's four possible outcomes. There's yes,
Oh,
no,
yeah.
no.
Okay, I thought
yes,
you meant that
no,
25%
yes, right?
of the people you swipe on are you swipe back
And I
on.
think the only ones you can
Statistically,
message
like-
are the ones that are yes.
I believe so,
I
yes.
think there's no yes nos. Like,
Well,
yes,
yeah.
the one that says yes on you and you said no on them. Then
Yeah,
Exactly.
I believe that's how it works.
Now, the same thing used to play out, and it took a while. Like, I actually found online dating was very, quote unquote, good for me to be able to learn how to interact from a distance, right? And so the profiles, yes, you would see a picture, but that picture would not necessarily be an outrageously attractive one. There was no filtering back then. It was whatever snapshots people had to download and upload. And you would read their profile, and depending on how their profile was written and what they said in it, they could be interesting, right? And the photo might not do that justice, right? And then you would, you'd get notifications. Someone had looked at yours, or they would get notification you had looked at theirs. Sometimes you send a message, and sometimes they would respond, sometimes they wouldn't.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes, and it would depend entirely on, okay, what are they saying here? How are they saying it? So you could be flirtatious, or you could just,
try and read between the
not,
lines. Yeah.
Right. You could make a smart ass comment.
Yeah. Guardedly flirtatious. Yeah.
Right. So for instance, I was on Plenty of Fish. One woman, her profile name, she had written in PFO 101 instead of POF 101 was her nickname.
Okay.
Right? And I just sent to her.
101st attempt at Plenty of Fish.
Oh, I joked like.
Or she told 101 guys to please fuck off.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there you go.
So I teased her about the PFO.
Yeah.
Right. And so that generated the conversation.
Started the conversation.
Right. My other aspect about the response to what you were saying is it's not just the way a person looks. Part of the way a person looks is going to be the way they dress.
Yeah.
Right. Are they wearing something that's appropriate to their body size?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
There's facial expression.
Yes.
There's tone of voice. There's body language.
Absolutely.
All these things.
Before, no one walked into the bar
and
just, boom, I'm going to hit on her. I mean, guys did, but by and large, you went into the bar, you read the room for a little bit.
Yeah.
You had a drink, you're there with your buddies, and while you're talking to guys, you're looking around the dance floor. You see someone, okay, she's attractive. So now, okay, boom, the binary kicks in. I find her attractive. Now I'm going to observe her for a little bit. How does she interact with her friends? What is she wearing? What are her facial expressions? Does she smile a lot? Does she seem energetic, charismatic, a happy person, or does she seem sullen or crabby? Does she look kind of down? You're making all of these assessments that you can't on Tinder.
Yeah.
That you can't with a snapshot photo on a dating app.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is that to it. And then maybe before you actually go and try and chat her up, and this is not universally acceptable to the bar scene. It depends what bar you're in and what time period. You could ask her to dance. And then if she just dances with you, then you get an idea of, is she amenable to, you'll know by the end of the dance.
Oh, yeah.
Do you go buy her a drink? Do you go back to the bar with her and begin a conversation? Or is it, okay, she's clearly not interested in me. She danced with me out of courtesy. Or maybe she was potentially interested in me, but now by the end of the dance, she's decided no. Like she needed a little bit more time to make that binary.
Because your moves were just not sick enough.
Could be. Or that maybe I wasn't a good enough dancer.
What vibe, what energy
breath.
was she getting off you? Right? You know?
Charlie is going to win the prize for the most annoying dog I've ever met.
He is.
Because I can tell you this much, you know, and this isn't to brag, right? Because some of it, at least, is not bragging.
Yeah.
You know, but a lot of women considered me very good looking.
Yeah.
Like, very good looking.
And you're tall.
Back in the day, right?
Tall helps.
So I
Tall
would
helps a
go.
lot.
I would go to Barry T's Club Malibu, Goose Looney's.
wow.
Right? So, and I would
Rolling
go,
back to years.
Yeah, I would go there on my own.
Uh-huh.
And I was in my mod phase back in the day, right? So all of you who jam Quadrophenia fans,
Yeah.
So you were
Right.
a suit and you wore a
So-
scooter with a whole whack of mirrors on it?
I had found this 60s suit that was tailor-made. It was pinstripe, narrow lapels, and a narrow tie. Obviously, the same old man who had owned these things had dropped them off at Valley Village the same day, right?
Yeah.
I bought this fucking thing. And then I
This
had
whole ensemble.
a Canadian anorak that I took the liner out of. And I wore that. And I would go to Goose, and then I'd have to check the coat, which was probably a good thing. So you don't want to have this army jacket while you're on the dance floor, right? And, you know, I got lots of looks.
Yeah.
No one ever approached me. And I was too shit scared to go approach anyone else.
And that was, I guess, the way it was done at the time. It was not really considered acceptable for a girl to approach you.
Yeah.
The best she could do is look at you a lot and try and make eye contact with you.
Yeah.
To say, okay,
Yeah.
she's approachable.
And
you know,
then
like
if
she's looking at you,
Yeah.
she's kind of saying, dude,
and if you
I
didn't,
would like you to come over.
if you didn't, then
She took it as a saying,
eventually she stopped paying
yeah,
attention.
because
to
she
me, right?
figures he's not interested
Right.
in me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to keep trying to make eye contact with him.
Yeah.
He's not picking up when I'm laying down.
Yeah.
I'll find my option B. Yeah.
And
It all depended on you having enough courage to make that step, you know.
Twice actually I was approached. Once was by the woman who was interested. Her friend came to talk to me to kind of
Yeah.
scope me out and say, and okay, he's approachable.
She was
And
doing
then,
the
and then
recce.
she eventually came
Yeah,
over.
doing the recce.
She did the recce.
God bless her. That's a good one, man.
The other time was this bombshell. I mean, she was dressed like Madonna. She was done up. This was 86. She was done up like Madonna in her Marilyn Monroe phase.
Yeah.
Right? And I was just hanging out, just do. And she just comes out, grabs me by the hands, and, hey, gorgeous, let's go dance, right?
Yeah.
She just drags me onto the dance floor. I'm, okay, I can live with this. Right?
Yeah.
Turns out she'd had a fight with her boyfriend. Right? So,
yeah.
you know, it doesn't quite count. But
Yeah, it doesn't quite count. I mean, it's style points,
yeah.
but yeah, it doesn't quite count. What is bothering him now?
Her.
Her.
Yeah, he doesn't.
No. Interesting anecdote to that. So the next summer of 87, this was 86. We went on one date. I absolutely failed.
Yeah.
Other sidebar, this woman told me on this date, she was from Ardrossan. She'd never been farther from home than Leduc.
Wow.
And I was like, you know,
This is 88, you said?
86.
86.
Right? And
Wow.
I, you know, 84, I traveled Europe
Yeah.
with my buddy, right? You know, in, early 70s, I'd lived in England.
How old was she? I mean, she's 16. Okay, I get it.
Well, no, she was, I mean, okay, I would have been, this was 86.
But if she's in her 20s.
I would have been 20. She would have been 20.
Yeah,
Right?
I
She
mean,
was about the same
like-
age as me.
Like,
So-
have you never gone on summer vacation? Good God, girl.
So the next summer,
Mm-hmm.
I'm living in Maple Ridge. BC, so just outside of Mission. Right?
Yeah.
And the local place, the local bar is having a casino night. So I show up for that, right? Now, I showed up. I don't think I was wearing my suit, but I was wearing my anorak. So I was identifiable, right?
Yeah.
And just prior to the casino night, they had strippers, right? And
Male or female?
female.
Okay.
And so I show up. I'm in the crowd, and the woman up there dancing
Is that gal?
is a woman named Amanda.
Okay.
And this girl was named Amanda. Looked just like Marilyn Monroe. Looked just like Madonna in a Marilyn Monroe face. They were playing the song Amanda for her to dance to.
Okay.
Right? And I was like, I've always wondered if that was her. Because
it looked like her, eh?
she was the last stripper of the night before the casino started. And I dumbass that I was. I was just like, hey, is that you? You know, because I didn't think there was anything wrong with it, right? You know, but she just barged right past me, did not look me in the eyes, right? Like she just got right off that floor. And anyways.
You know, on this point, I remember as a younger man in just starting my working life, right? Getting into the workplace. And so, of course, I'm in entry-level positions, and I'm learning from guys who are 10 to 15 years older than me.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely guys in that baby boomer, the late baby boomers kind of thing. Guys who would be in their late 60s now. So I'm in like 21, 22. So they're going to be 35, 36, 37. And listening to the conversations as they're talking about, you know, those who are on the dating market or whatever, that this was a coup if you dated a stripper. You know, like, did you guys, like, that was a coup. That was like, oh yeah, like, I was dating her. Like, I met this girl. I was dating her for a little while. She had an amazing body. She was a stripper or whatever. I would not date a stripper if you paid me. It's like, how can I find the most emotionally damaged, batshit crazy, schizophrenic woman with daddy issues on the planet? Let's go to the Peeler Bar. Like, what a nightmare. Oh, God. Well, okay, full disclosure. I had a job, a part-time job, driving limousine.
Okay.
And interesting gig. I had to work with a lot of strippers because it was a big bus limousine. So you're getting strippers, you're taking guys, or you're taking parties to strip bars, male and female. It was probably 60% females going to male strippers. And then you're getting strippers performing on the bus. Oh my God, I just found them to be the most annoying, conceited, damaged, batshit crazy people.
The strippers.
The female strippers. Like, oh my God, I do not know why you would possibly want to date one of them. And they're not that good looking. They're not. Like, they're living hard. And when you get within 5 feet of them, it shows. Like, they are not. Like, I don't think they're good. Sorry. I don't know. Maybe I'm my perception, and I will say this. If I like a person, I will find her more physically attractive, regardless of whatever physical flaws she may have. Like, there have been women I have worked with who I thought were stunningly beautiful, who will never make the cover of Maxim magazine. But I admit I'm influenced because I like them as people. I thought they were awesome.
Well, again, that
yeah, and you don't get that.
Plays
you don't
into
get
things.
that. You don't get that from a dating app. But these strippers, oh my God, I just, you know, I never understood that about the guys older than me. How they thought that was some kind of positive, that selling feature. If you're bragging to your friends, like, yeah, I dated a stripper. If one of you guys said to me, like, yeah, I'm dating a stripper, I'd say, like, dude, man, it doesn't have to be that way. Like, I'd be feeling sorry for you. I wouldn't be like, oh, yeah, that's good for you. No, it's like, dude, you can do better than that. Treasure yourself, man.
It's like, you guys watch The Last Kingdom?
No.
No?
The
series on Netflix, The Last Kingdom?
No.
What's it about?
Oh, it's about a guy who's a Saxon, but as a child he's
raised by the Vikings.
Raised by the Vikings, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And so he loves the Danes. They're a lot funner. He loves their gods and stuff like that. But eventually he gets this band of guys who follow him around. He's their leader and stuff. And one of the guys, Citric, is he falls in love with a local prostitute, and everyone's teasing him about it all the time.
This is kind of a common trope. Like, wasn't that a thing in not the Lord of the Rings?
Definitely not in the Lord of the
Rings.
Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Game of Thrones.
You know what?
I
have only ever watched one episode, the first episode of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, I haven't seen it either. I know the entire story because I've just seen about 500 YouTube clips of it. So I kind of figured it was kind of like, for me, it was Cole's Notes. Nowadays, I don't have the attention span to sit through like an hour of television. Like, I just don't. I get fidgety. I need to get up. I need to move.
No. Okay.
So, and of course, my friends don't like this. So I don't watch shows like that. I have to go on YouTube and just watching clips. So I'll, like, when people are talking about it at work, I can follow the storyline. But I remember, that was one of the dudes from the Northern family there, the Starks or whatever. Yeah, they had a guy who was in love with the local prostitute.
No, I'm sure it's.
I think this is a pretty common.
Yeah, it's been in a few.
In every story
in Game of Thrones, it was actually the most frequenter of prostitutes was Tyrion Lannister. It was the midget.
Right.
Pardon me, little person.
Played
by Peter Dinklage.
Yeah, that's right.
So he was always.
If
you're trying to find Tyrion, your first place you look was a local brothel.
Yeah.
Right.
But he never fell in love with any of them.
He fell in love with one.
Oh, and his father killed her.
No,
and that's why he killed the father.
He killed her after she shacked up with his father. It got really weird.
It got really weird. Yeah, I guess it.
Oh, and Titus Pillow did in Rome as well.
Yeah.
Titus, yeah.
So this is a pretty, I'd say, in just about every film and major piece of work in the last 300 years, if a prostitute is a major character, there's going to be some tragic love story of a guy, of an unrequited love, of the nice guy fool who falls in love with her. And
she just doesn't have the emotional capacity for
love. She don't.
Point of order. Are we recording?
Girl.
Mm-hmm. So is this our episode, or is this going to be one of those other
the lost episodes?
Today, I think we're doing a clip episode, regardless. So
okay. All right. Well, hopefully we haven't said anything outrageous. I don't think we have.
But
not as outrageous as the last time we talked about this.
back to this business of people, like Gen X or Gen Zers dating their friends. That makes sense because we live in a world where it's not acceptable to go hit on a stranger. It's not socially acceptable.
That's true.
So, well, it's definitely off-putting. Like, I would not want to be dating.
I wouldn't want to be dating.
As a young person.
You have to do so much throat clearing on the introduction.
My understanding for Gen Z is that if you did approach someone, say in a bar, which is one of the few places where it is still socially acceptable to do so, that like we talk about, the certain things haven't changed. Guy looks at girl, makes that instant binary decision: do I approach or not approach? Observes for a little while, tries to get characteristics, ideas, personality. Okay, she's worth actually talking to. Maybe he asks her to dance, whatever. But the conversation is immediately, okay, here's where you can find me on social media, on IM, Tinder, whatever. And then it terminates. Because then he has to give her time to decide whether or not to contact him offline. Or not offline. Online.
Yeah.
And that's where the real conversation takes place because it's private and it's just them with no other distractions. That it would be considered socially inappropriate for him to really move. Hey man, let's go on a date. It's like, no, you don't even know her yet. She doesn't even know you yet. She's not going to go anywhere with you. So you can do a conversation, but it's at a superficial level. You have to provide her with your internet credentials. And so then when she gets to look at you on Instagram, Facebook, whatever, like whatever social media platforms you're on, and then she will decide whether or not she wants to go further with you. So it's the internet is a filtering device. So if you're in a friendship group, say you have a social circle of 10 or 12 people that's co-ed, this friendship group is your audition as a guy.
Yeah.
It's an audition phase. And then, I mean, let's all face it. I mean, this is the stereotypical friend zone. Guy becomes friends with a girl when he doesn't want to be friends at all. What he's hoping is that by proving his bona fides of character and personality, she will decide that, yeah, you know what, this guy's a quality guy. I will decide to date him romantically. When that was his intention all along.
Or was it? I mean, I can't speak for these guys.
Oh, usually.
Well,
I think it is. I think it is.
I
don't think that's changed from our time
Yeah,
either.
because actually the next paragraph of this piece talks a little bit about the friend zone and how maybe you're not going to get stuck in the friend zone. But I think it's more not so much guys getting themselves in the friend zone is just being in the peer group, right? You get a peer group of guys and girls.
Yeah.
And then dating happens with it, but you weren't necessarily like, following this puppy dog and this chick around or anything.
I think a lot of that is it.
There maybe still a lot of
being in that social circle is your audition.
Yeah.
It's and if you're striking out, like let's say it's a group of 4 men, 4 women, and you join into that, and you find, let's say you were particularly attracted to one, to girl A, and somewhat attracted to girl B. C and D, they were just genuine friends too. You weren't really interested in them. And so then, you're part of that friend group, say, for a semester. And then you find that, okay, girl A has no interest in me. Girl B has no interest in me. I have, you look for the social clues or the cues that suggest that there may be some reciprocal interest or reciprocal attraction in there. If you don't find them, you move on. You fade away from that social group and you find a new social group and move into that. And I think I'm going to, I don't know this for a fact, I'm gleaning this from what I read of popular culture and my discussions with like younger people who I interact with in various stages or in various contexts, various forms. That's my suspicion as to how things are working in that. The friend zone is a kind of a different matter. Although this is there's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram, between being in the friend zone, which is a more unique one-on-one thing, and being in a friend group, and then eventually dating someone in your friend group. Not the same, similar.
Yeah, because the common trope is that if you're in the friend zone and that one-on-one in the friend zone, you're never gonna move to being a romantic
exactly.
partner.
That is what defines the friend zone. Yeah, she will never accept you as a partner, and it's a matter of the guy. And I think that was the same when we were that age.
Yeah, no,
it's just that there was no term for it.
I am curious, if this is because there was another survey talked about from 2021, 68% of people at the University of Vic,
UVic, yeah,
were dating people they were friends with. So I'm curious in the long-term data if what's going to happen if Gen Z's marriage outcomes are going to be better.
Would be interesting. Yeah, or I guess we're going to find out.
Right?
Or will we?
Well, you never know. You may not be allowed to answer the question, or we'll just be dead before the results come.
Yeah, that was kind of my point.
Maybe.
I think we're not that old.
I don't know. I don't even know what Gen Z is. So, what age is that? And okay,
they're under 25s right now.
I'd say it's
when are they getting
15
married?
To 25s.
When are we getting married? And when does that data pool get collected? Right? Because it ain't gonna be in the next 5 years.
Might be.
Right?
Might be. I think. Well, no.
Yeah, I don't see. I don't know if the millennial, the X and the millennial trend of marrying later is going to hold for Gen Z or not. Right? Like they might go. They seem to be doing some things like old fashioned, so they might get married younger as well.
It's been getting married later has been a spectacular failure for the millennials.
Yeah, and there's a lot of
Gen X.
And there's a lot of
Gen X.
A lot of accomplished married women with families. Point out it's like you can't have it all. You can have it all, but you can't have it all at once. So you should have the kids first and get the family on the road.
There is a window.
You can do once the kids start going to school and you have that 8 hours a day that you don't have to deal with them. You can start pursuing careers.
Yeah, exactly. Like and that whole delaying of life. Of those familial and reproductive goals for the sake of career and education has proven to be a spectacular disaster and heartache for Gen or for the millennials.
Just an
spectacular.
FYI, Charlie will lick your hand for about the next half hour if you let him.
All right.
Something out of this tasty he wants.
So
like that nicotine, huh?
Yeah, like that nicotine. Yeah. So that's that. It wouldn't surprise me if Gen Z sees that in their cousins and their older siblings and says, "Nope, I don't want to be that." Like especially the women of Gen Z say, "No, I don't want to be that 35-year-old woman who has a good career, but desperately wanted children and never got them, and now it's too late."
Do they? I mean, again, I mean, here's the generation gap. Like so much of what we're talking about. Yeah, and I identify as a male, so I never understood what it's like to be a female, anyways, or those who identify as them. But nowadays, across the board, what holds true of all the stuff we've spoken about in the last 10 minutes, I'm kind of like, well, what is friendship these days? What is what is the nature of it?
Yeah,
what is the
line,
quality
the
of
line
it? What
between
is the depth
romantic
of it?
and platonic? I think is a bit more blurred now.
Yeah, possibly. But even then, it's like, how do they even go about having friends? Do they even have friends? The youth of today, they spend so much time on their phones, and I know it's easy because I spend so much time on my phone.
Oh yeah,
phone,
that is something I always find ironic is that people our age are so quick to dump on young people. Oh, you guys are always on your phone. Get all of us together in a restaurant, and you watch how there'll be no conversation because everybody's on a phone.
Well, actually, no,
I think younger people might be more resistant to it because they've grown up with the phone and growing up with the tablet. Right? Like I'm addicted to this fucking thing.
Yeah, like
I'm
us,
bad.
Gen Xers.
Oh yeah, I'm bad.
We are just as bad as everybody we criticize.
well, no, socially, when I'm with you guys, like be it at, let's say, a regimental association dinner or something, my phone's away. Right?
Yeah,
if I'm out with my mates, generally we're getting together either to drink and chat,
We are the outliers.
or
We are the outliers. Because like
Yes,
I'll go to functions at work. Like we do a lunch work or like a lunch meeting or a social thing where they try and say, hey, let's get everyone together and try and do a bit of team building, whatever. 8 people at the table and 5 of them are on their phones at any one time. And it almost like we're double tasking. Like we do a phone conversation while we're doing a person conversation, and we'll drop between one and the other, say every minute.
Okay, but that's
or every
work.
30 seconds.
Right, that's work. I mean, so how seriously, that's not quote unquote a social thing.
We could go to a restaurant right now.
Yeah.
And we'll just sit in a booth and we'll watch. And I bet you that holds true. Or we go to a bar. We'll go to like a lounge and we watch people.
Yeah.
We'll go to like a place like the Keg or Chop or something like that. And we'll just sit and we'll watch. And I'll bet you we'll find the same thing. People in Gen X and boomers will be constantly checking their phones.
I know I'm on my phone if there's nothing else to do. But like I said, if I'm out socially, I'm out socially. Right? Yeah. I'm not checking my phone. Unless if there's some really important email or something I need to keep my finger on the pulse of, I'll check that.
Yeah.
Right? But otherwise, it's put away. And
I'd say, but we're the outliers. We're the outliers.
I'm not an outlier. I'm horrible. I would self-admit I'm horrible.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'll say,
friends of mine, they had a game. It's like when you went to lunch, everybody put their phones face down in the middle, right? And the first
guy to grab his phone gets the tab.
Gets the bill, yeah.
Yep.
Well, interesting. Well, I mean, for me, I think there is some validity to our generation saying, you talk about your tropes, your kids these days, and when I was your age and stuff like that. I mean,
bastards.
And ironically, I'm going to bring up
music down.
I'm going to bring up the meme that appears on Facebook all the time that talks about when we were kids, we would, we'd just fuck off. We'd the rule was when the streetlights came
you
on,
had to be home. Yeah.
You had to be home, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, you were just like every kid in the neighborhood was out
on their bike and gone
somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? And drinking out of the water hose. And,
Facebook itself is a meme.
Oh, yeah.
Because Gen Z is not on it. Like younger people, or Facebook is now seen as an old
person's thing.
It is an old person's platform.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking when you're talking
drive
Zuckerberg
nuts.
When you're talking about the online verification, I'm like, there's a reason among many reasons why I could never date someone younger than me because like if you're verifying me for Instagram, my Instagram is literally just pictures of the dog. That's all it is.
Yeah.
There's one picture of Mont Saint Michel in France.
Yep.
And then before I focus on the dog. There's like a melted Twix where there's like
Yeah.
left and right Twix have evidently resolved their differences. But other than that, right? Like it's the dogs.
Well,
there's not even pictures of me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I can't, but by any stretch of the imagination, imagine what it would be like to date anyone under the age of, I'll be generous here, 40 these days.
Well,
I
have read that the biggest age gap that something like 80% of women, and this is what I've read. I don't have this hard. That 80% of women said that the biggest age gap that they would consider was 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I have dated at that age gap. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know that it was a 15-year age gap. I was pretty sure it was around 10. But once, I went on a couple of dates, and I did find out that, it was that big a gap. But I really liked her. So I thought, I'm going to see where this goes. I didn't find it hugely difficult to overcome that cultural references and such like that. But I think it would be like when I talk to my cousins who are, say, 15 to 18 years younger than I am. Then I do notice it in just casual conversation with them. Yeah, that there are gaps in primarily in formative experiences. Like what I'll talk about, say, some of the media I was exposed to in my early teens, or significant events like 9/11, or the end of the Cold War, the reunification, the wall coming down in '89, and the reunification of Germany in '91. Someone who is, say, even 10 years younger than me, I was in my late teens when that was happening. They were 10 years old. So, there's a profound, that's where it really kicks in. The experiences that were profound to me at 40 would have been profound or happened to them when they were 30. So we shared the impact of it. It's not a big deal. It's the stuff that happens to you, I think, under the age of 18, which is formative, which is seminal. But that's where it's difficult to relate to someone who's more than 10 years younger than you.
Yeah. I mean, partly, and we touched on this a bit earlier, but it's being able to put certain things in context, not just significant events, but the day-to-day. Mm-hmm. So think about the racism from back in the day. I mean,
how casual it was and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was just
right.
Common,
I remember
there wasn't the same awareness. There wasn't the same awareness.
I mean, you could. I mean, when we were kids, you could drop the N-word in a joke.
Yes.
Well, it was. Well, it used to be part of the eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I always learned that as Tigger instead of the N-word. But.
That said.
But I
heard it, but I'm a few years older than you.
Yeah.
When I was a kid in elementary school, there was 2 children who were visible minorities in my entire elementary school. And one of them had only come, say, in the last 2 years of it. Like it was a 1 to 6 or K to 6. The one child only arrived midway through our grade 5 year. So, and there was a game we used to play where we would slide along a patch of ice. You'd take a run and you would try and kind of slide like you were surfing down the entire patch of ice and then jump off before the ice came to an end, say in a fence or a piece of snow or what have you, and not fall down. As soon as you fell down, the shout went up. And of course, it was a cycle. Everyone, as soon as you go down, there's another kid not a meter behind you. And it's just long cycle of people.
You get the back of the line.
As soon as one kid falls down, the shout goes out, nigger pile. And then everyone is trying to land into this wiggling pile of bodies. And it's almost like a mosh pit. So that the art, the zen of this game was to, as soon as you see that group of kids on the bottom or kids who have fallen down, you run to the beginning of the ice patch, take a good run at it so you got velocity coming down that ice, body slam like you're coming off the top rope onto this pile of kids, and then quickly disentangle yourself and roll off before the next kid lands on you. Because the kids at the bottom of the pile, inevitably, glasses are broken, tooth is gone, all of this stuff. Now, we had no concept of what that word meant.
Yeah.
We had no idea what it was.
Yeah, someone
no idea
somewhere
it was a pejorative.
uttered it a first time, and everyone else just said, "Okay, that's the thing you say when."
Yeah. To be honest,
happens,
I
right?
thought it was like a wood pile.
Yeah.
Because like when you're working out outside, on the farm, and you're cutting firewood for the winter, and you just chuck it into a pile, it's just random shapes all thrown together. I assumed that that's what the word meant, that it was some reference to a disorganized, like a heap as compared to a stack.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of how we looked. We looked like a heap of firewood kind of thing. So that's what I thought it meant. I had no idea it was a pejorative aimed at a given identifiable group. So, yeah, there was, I'm going to say there was, in a way, less racism because there was less opportunity for it. In that we were a more monoculture. There was fewer visible minorities. I don't, like, if you have, and this is what I've seen in small towns and working class neighborhoods that I've lived in. If you have 500 people who are purple skin and you got one guy who's blue skin.
All right. What kind of neighborhoods were you living in, man?
Between Europe and Canada.
Like purple skin and blue skin?
I don't want to.
What the fuck?
Because I've seen.
I get it. I'm just being. I'm just being.
I'm talking about some majority.
I'm being a dumbass.
That I've seen in
tough crowd, man. Tough crowd.
Gothenburg. But if you have one person out of say 500 who is of a different ethnicity, there's no racism. That person's not a threat.
Yeah.
As soon as you get up to a certain critical mass, and I'll say 30 people out of 500, then the other 470 start noticing demographic change.
Yeah.
And they start to feel threatened. That neighborhood, that street, when I was a kid, was a place where I felt familiar and I felt like I belonged. Now I go down that street and it's all signs and shops in a language I don't understand, selling products that I don't understand. Again, I don't feel welcome there. This is my home, but I don't feel welcome in it. And there's a sense of, what was it, Weber called it, alienation or something, enemy or something like that, to feel a sense of dislocation. And I think that's where, you need that critical mass of a minority for real racism to happen.
Sort of, but I think I'm going to disagree with you. And again, because there is...
I would disagree with you too, because to an extent...
I'm open to it.
I just remember, I was just thinking about it because I grew up in Millwoods, which for people who don't come from Edmonton has the reputation,
very diverse neighborhood.
Yeah, and has the reputation of largely being South Asian.
Yeah, Indo-Pakistani.
Indo-Pakistan, yeah. I remember when the first Indian family moved onto our street.
Yeah.
Right, and they had kids who were probably, I think the oldest was maybe a year or two younger than me, and I was probably, I think, maybe 8 or 9 when they moved in, right? And so we're... the kids from the neighborhood were out playing, throwing rocks, doing whatever crap stuff we did, and these kids come running out and want to play, and we're like, oh, hey, cool.
Okay.
They didn't speak much English.
Yeah.
They had no cultural reference. They didn't get the games.
Yeah,
and it was just
games.
I don't think they ever came out again. Right? I'd see them, but it was just
was it?
And it wasn't racism, discrimination.
Exactly.
It was just
a failure to connect.
It was a failure.
Yeah, that's not racism.
A failure to connect. But there was, and I know as a 9-year-old, you don't really have know that you should make the effort to try and
you would have the same effect if they were Russian.
Yeah, true enough. Or German who didn't speak.
Yeah, who don't speak English.
My mom spoke German, so
don't have the same cultural references. Don't understand the childhood games.
Yeah,
so that's got nothing to do with appearance.
That's a one of. To me, I wouldn't, but that there's a bit of,
I don't know. I look back on that period of my childhood. I'm like, Jesus, should have tried to do better. But I mean, you're fucking 9 or 10. But
that's also presentism.
Yeah,
you cannot judge the events of 1982 with the morality of 2023.
Yeah.
Well, no, you can't. I mean, and that's what I was going to say. You said 82, right? I'm going to go back a few years. I'm going to go to. Let's say 76, okay, 77, right? And so we lived in row housing condominiums.
What city?
Ottawa.
Okay.
And, so I'm a young teenager at this, I'm like 12, maybe 13. And so I had a group of white guys I hung out with, and we were mostly in the same age group within a year. And it was like a 10, 15-minute walk to our middle school. And one day, I don't know, it must have been lunchtime when we were walking back to school, but coming the other way was one of a girl our age from our school who was East Indian, right? And her family lived one row over where most of our friends lived, most of our kids. Now, we didn't hang out with them much, right? But I knew her name.
Yeah. She was a classmate.
Well, she wasn't a classmate.
Well,
I was in French immersion.
A schoolmate,
right?
I guess.
She was in the school. I mean, there were, a few hundred kids in this school, and all the French immersion kids have been in the same classification since kindergarten.
You tend to be in a cohort. 4, you tend to be in a silo.
So I had little to do with her in the neighborhood, nothing to do with her at school. But here we are, we're walking. She's walking the other way, and as she goes past, my friends start snickering. They're like, packy, 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 packy under their breath, right? And I was so ashamed, right? And you talk about, like you, Steve, you were saying, like, you measure yourself now against then, and it's kind of like, even then I was kind of wishing, I felt I should have been able to do something.
See,
right?
But there's nothing you could have done. I didn't feel that.
Yeah,
then I was like, those people are weird, and I didn't want to hang out.
And the other thing is...
Yeah, but that's a bit different, right?
Was that racism, or was that a projection of adolescent insecurity?
Well, I think it's both. Right?
I don't. I think that we as children always do that. They always seek to tribalize, and the only way they know how... First of all adolescents have tremendous insecurity. And as an adolescent and an immature human being, the only way you know how to build your own confidence is to tear down the confidence of someone else around you in the eyes of your peer group.
Now, but because of the times that we were living in, right?
Yeah.
That manifested itself racially.
Well, it was also considered more acceptable to do it.
Exactly.
And you will use any difference you can perceive. So her complexion was the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
But if it was in an earlier time, say an earlier generation, if she was Protestant and your group was Catholic, that probably would have manifested.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or if she had red hair and was heavily freckled, that would have been like would have been ginger.
But ginger. I suppose to a ginger it kind of sucks. But there's, I don't think there's the denigration that goes with calling someone.
Like I said,
ginger.
it was the low hanging fruit. Yeah. It was the easiest thing to see. But that sort of thing is what children do all over the world, everywhere, and it's because they are immature and incredibly flawed people. At that stage of our lives, right? And, I'll bet you money that if we were to bring back every single one who was in that group, they would, the kid who said it would be ashamed. It'd be like one of the worst cringe memories that an individual probably has. So again, I know that the tendency of our age today is to assume that all social problems are a result of racism. That is the ultimate common denominator, that all problems and difficulties come from racism. And I kind of push back against that because I think, again, we're just being intellectually lazy when we do that. That's the easy button.
There's no question that we're being intellectually lazy these days. I mean, we're not.
Well, I guess it's society.
The three of us are not. Yeah. But, the rest of you fuckers.
Lazy assholes.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, because that is too easy to say that, right? I mean, one of the things I was going to say is based on that same example is, in my lifetime, I can't honestly remember when the last lynching was in the U.S., right? But it was probably sometime in the 60s. and I was born mid-'60s. So I was
You think
within
it
a
was
few
that
years.
late?
Yeah.
Well, the movie Mississippi Burning, which I think took place in
Oh,
1963,
yeah. That
was an FBI
yeah.
response to a lynching, right?
Was that a lynching or was that just murder? Like when you're talking about lynching, like get a noose and hang him from a tree. That's what I think of as lynching.
Well, there was a couple different
As
because
compared
there
to
was
just
what was the
killing
name
the
of,
poor kids.
What was the name of there was like a 12 or 13-year-old kid.
Yes, and there's a monument
that's
to it.
Emmett
Till.
Emmett Till.
Yeah.
Yeah, they dragged him behind a pickup for like
Yeah.
miles and miles and miles.
I guess. Okay, let's
So-
I think
broaden
that
it to
technically is a
say.
lynching.
Could we say that a lynching is killing somebody because of their racial identity?
Yeah.
If we say that, then yeah,
but we can broaden it.
Definitely going up
But
into the
my
1960s.
whole point is,
Definitely.
like, and then the homophobia
Yep.
that I grew up with, and you
Yeah.
guys probably
yes.
grew up with,
Yes.
right?
That went on
So-
well into the 80s,
So
even 90s.
Into the 90s.
Into the 90s.
we are able to
Yeah.
look back and understand, like
Yeah.
like the woke generation does not.
Yeah.
Okay, you're looking at these things, and we're going to take the intellectual laziness out of it.
Yeah.
There's a whole bunch of
Yeah.
that's a whole fucking rabbit hole we
Yeah.
go down, right? But you're only seeing your experience, right?
Yeah, we are prisoners of our own perception.
We've experienced
Yeah.
what racism is like in a way that you will never understand. Like we've been witness to it.
Yeah, like
we've
say
we've
that the
understood
millennials
it.
and Gen Z never will.
We've understood it as a generation in a way that you never will.
Yeah.
Right? And we don't understand it the way our parents
Yeah.
did and our grandparents did. And one of the stories, and this is one thing I can't remember if I've told you guys. If I have, please forgive me. But so my mom's parents, salt of the earth.
Yeah.
Nicest people on earth.
Yeah.
My grandfather, he had a brother, Uncle Cliff.
Yeah.
He would show up. We'd see him every Christmas. So
Yeah.
we moved here in 79. Starting in 79, we were down on the lower mainland for Christmas every year. He was there every Christmas Eve at my mom's parents' place. Nicest, mellowest guy. Apparently, he was a bachelor. He'd been hurt early in life. Never
Yeah.
got married as a result of that, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, quiet as a mouse, just a nice guy, right? Doing this for 20 years. 1 year, he actually speaks up. Starts telling
Yeah.
a story about when he was in the, he was in an engineering regiment. He was in a forestry section of an engineering regiment in the Ardennes
Yeah.
in winter 44.
Yeah.
And he's talking about, and he's describing this. Oh, like this is really cool, right? Again, nicest guy on earth, right?
Yeah.
And then so and so, he was a darky, don't you know, right? And then he just carries on with his story, right? And I'm like,
Did he know that, or did he consider darky to be a pejorative?
Probably not.
he did not.
Yeah.
No.
He
Probably not, 'cause-
obviously did not.
I remember
Right?
that term being used.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I
it was a
don't,
time. There was a play term. It was the play term.
it was a blight. I think it was at
Yeah,
the time.
Yeah, I think
It wasn't
so too.
necessarily
But
polite to
Yeah.
African Americans.
Yeah,
Certainly-
probably not to them. No.
No,
To
but it
him,
was the term
but-
used in Polite Society as opposed to
Even
drop
if-
the N-bomb.
I'm
Yeah,
sure
exactly,
lots
exactly.
of people would have used it
Yeah.
in a pejorative way. He was.
Well, I think
I
yeah,
know that
I
he
think
was
it was
not,
kind of meant
right?
pejoratively because you wouldn't just say because
Yeah, he would.
you couldn't
yeah,
just say, well, he was a black guy.
or he was a Negro.
Yeah,
Which at the time was also a
Yeah,
more
Negro-
formal
yeah,
term.
yeah. Negro was the
Is that socially acceptable these days?
Negro.
Yeah.
I don't think so.
I mean, there's the
it's-
NAACP still.
Yeah, but NAACP is National Association of Color or for the Advancement of Color, colored people.
Okay,
Colored
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
But you don't.
Oh no. Sorry, I'm thinking United Negro College Fund.
Yes,
Does that still exist?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that's because the name came from a different age.
I
Right?
guess.
mean, it's
Also, the other thing is, I think I'm not comfortable with
Like-
using
like-
it because
like-
it starts with the letter N,
Yeah.
and I don't want to get
Like
anywhere
I don't think it's weird. It's in a weird place because it does have the relation. I mean, it is the
Yeah.
root. It is the root
Yeah,
of
the root word, yeah.
the root of the
Yeah.
pejorative. It's just.
Yeah.
I mean, the pejorative is a slang term.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think people are uncomfortable with that. But I don't. I don't think it has
I'm not
a
comfortable with calling
pejorative
someone a
weight.
Jew.
I
But
prefer.
yeah, but even
I'm
Jews will
totally
call
not
themselves
comfortable
Jews.
with
But
that.
yeah, it's
I
weird.
just don't like saying, "Oh, that guy's a Jew." No, I don't. I'll say he's of Jewish faith,
yeah, and I'm
or
the same
he is
way.
Jewish.
He's
I don't
Jewish.
Like, I don't like saying he's a Jew. No, I don't.
Yeah.
No. That
yeah,
seems,
Jewish always seems better.
That seems a pejorative to me. I don't want to do that.
I agree. Well, and I think again because Negro in common usage was a word that comes from a different time And so,
that could be it too.
In general,
it was tainted by its association
tainted.
to that time. Yeah,
I think that's a good way to put it. I'm not even sure whether we can use the word black anymore, right? And sometimes it seems to be okay, sometimes it doesn't. You know, I mean, who knows what
I think
a
it
white
has
man
to be
can
like
say these days.
if you're talking to a black person, they have to be okay with it or something like if they start using like African American or Canadian, African Canadian or whatever, then you just you don't use black.
You just go with it.
Yeah. But if they say black, then you're fine with black.
I can tell you this: when I was purchaser, and this was I was purchaser from 2000, 2009, somewhere in there. I sent out an Excel spreadsheet, right? And I was going to a supplier, and I said, I want you to price out all these things for me, right? And I kept emailing it to this person, and it kept bouncing back. And the server kept telling me, I can't send this email, can't send this email. And so the first couple of times I was like, oh, I didn't press send. Yeah. And the second time I'm like,
do I have the email correct?
And I'm looking, and eventually I looked at it and said you have an unacceptable word in here, right? So I went through it, right? This Excel spreadsheet, and it was aerosol can, black.
Oh wow!
Right, and
what are you supposed to put? Obsidian?
The
noir.
The email server had been set up to filter out that word and say that this is a bad word. And I was like,
well,
and that was the beginning of the slippery slope for me, right? When you talk about context. So so another one, and again, it's is it a pejorative? Is it not?
Yeah.
The meaning is in the moment. So again, crazy kids when our church youth group, United Church Youth Group, not like leading edge, like 1982, not homophobic. Like
no.
We had like.
Church group or United Church was like the cutting edge of the social gospel.
And ours was the cutting edge of like Southminster Steiner Church was the cutting edge of that. Like our pastor was a lesbian, right? And she was just pushing for all this stuff.
Yeah,
right?
like
so,
you were on the bleeding edge of social justice within the Christian context.
A bunch of us, we had to convoy for some youth group event, right? And this is we were grade 10, I think, and there were some grade 12s in there that we didn't know. They were the big kids, right? And they were doing the driving there, and they stopped like Chinese fire drill, right? So
yes, I remember
so
that.
Everybody jumps out.
Yes, I still call it that. If you do it, I still call it Chinese.
Yeah,
right.
Chinese fire drill. I remember that. Yes,
I'm pretty sure I've come across more than one instance that says you cannot say that anymore, and I'm kind of like, why?
But that's what it is.
Because okay. I'm not sure why it's called that.
Chinese fire drill. We never know why. Yeah, I never knew why it was called that, right?
But
it's like,
is it meant to be a negative? Like, well, we said it.
Is it meant to be pejorative?
Even in the military context, right? Like,
you're reading my mind.
Like, think of all the SAS books you wrote when they talk about having
Chinese parliament.
It's the Chinese parliament.
Yeah.
Right. When they have when the team gets together to figure out the plan, that was called
when you're
Chinese
in,
parliament.
And like we've used that ourselves.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of the patrol and the patrol commander calls in the section and says, okay, this is a situation. What do you guys think? And then we do that in the we're down in the low ground in the cops, and there's 7 of us all get together, and everyone throws in their 2 cents worth. Yeah, the Chinese parliament.
Yeah. And that was
and is that pejorative?
Yeah. I have also heard.
I can imagine the Brits, particularly the SAS, being racist, right? So maybe when they were saying, maybe it was.
I also know
remember like they always called whatever. I think they were teaching judo in the British Army, right? They called it jab slapping.
Okay, well, that's racist. Okay, that's getting there.
I remember reading a book about banking and insurance legislation, or that there is legislation in place that for the longest time prevented banks could not sell insurance, and that this has only recently changed. And that the stipulation is that the exact term was a Chinese walls. There must be Chinese walls between the section of the bank that deals in insurance and the section of the bank that deals in finance.
And they still use that in the legal profession as well, like when you have complicated lawsuits.
Where you have, like, say, a departmental schism where Like, yeah, you're located in the same building, but these two systems must be completely separate.
Must be separate, yeah, for legal reasons. They call it a
Chinese wall.
Yeah.
Is that a pejorative?
Yeah. Like, I wonder,
or is it just a reference to the Great Wall of China? Right?
Yeah,
We
live in an age, first of all, where offense is in the ear of the beholder.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And no time is taken to consider.
Yeah, exactly. If I consider what you said to be offensive, you are automatically guilty as soon as I say you are. And this, to me, is this is a power play. We've all met that people. We've all shared the workplace with them. They're the grievance monger. Everything offends them. And they do it, I think, they do it as a way to gain power. They like being, I can shut you up. I can make your workplace uncomfortable. I can make you bend to my will by always being offended at everything. And this is where you get into the whole victimhood Olympics. Whoever has the greatest victim credentials has the most things to be offended about. If I'm handicapped, of a visible minority, transgender, homosexual, whatever, then I have the most latitude. There's the biggest range of words that you could say that I could get offended at. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of where we're at. So now we have to take a completely innocuous phrase like a Chinese wall and kind of like, oh, now I have to practice self-censorship. I have to close my little intellectual horizons a little bit because I'm afraid of what some complete stranger might say about me.
And you're guaranteed that someone somewhere is going to be offended about something that comes out of your mouth. Right?
Because it's power to them. This is the tragedy of the woke age.
Well, yeah. I mean, and the other one that I find really puzzling and is Chinese puzzle, right? Because if I understand
I haven't heard that term.
What we call a Chinese puzzle is a thing, is something, it's a concept with a lot of moving pieces.
So a complex system or idea.
Right. And my understanding is it's the puzzles where you've got like a
take the wooden piece off of the metal ring or something like that, or
the ones where you've got like a 5x5 grid of squares, but there's one's missing, and you have to
you move things around
until
form,
you get the picture, right? And I'm like, but even if it is one of the more complicated puzzles that you're talking about, you get we used to get in our stockings at Christmas, right? If they originated in China, calling them a Chinese puzzle, there's absolutely nothing wrong. Again, there's nothing pejorative about the concept. Here's a weird one. My brother and I...
It's almost a compliment because you're saying that, like, we don't call it a Brazilian puzzle. Yeah. We don't call it a Scottish puzzle. You're saying that this is a society that was able to make a complex... This came from the society that made the abacus, and this is not a coincidence. It's because they had an advanced enough technology that they could create complex puzzles.
And it's a challenge. And it's up to us to live up to this challenge. Right? Yeah. It's just a frame of reference.
Yeah,
right?
To me, that's not pejorative at all. That's almost a compliment.
My brother and I were, getting back to the origins of this particular story, we're sitting on the grass one day at my grandparents' place. And it's in this, it's not quite a cul-de-sac, but it's like a crescent. And this car pulls up in front of us, and we're sitting just to the opposite side of the sidewalk. Car pulls up. 3 doors open, right? Teenage Chinese girl gets out of the driver's seat, walks around the back, gets in the back where her mother, Chinese mother, is getting out. Chinese mother gets into the passenger seat where the Chinese father is getting out, going around to the driver's side to get in. They all get in, close the doors, drive away. I just look at my brother and
you just literally witnessed
Chinese fire drill.
Who was driving? The girl?
The daughter?
The daughter was driving.
Maybe she was just doing it for experience. Maybe.
Yeah, could be. But it was just like
slow-mo. Slow-mo Chinese fire drill.
Yeah.
And a literal one too. Right? Chinese. That's kind of funny.
And again, no disparaging them.
Speaking of racism, I remember men my father's age being very kind of angry towards the first wave of Chinese immigrants that came in the 1970s because they only bought Japanese cars. That was the stereotype. They only buy Japanese cars and they all stick together. And that kind of struck me as like, well, gentlemen, if you knew anything about China and Chinese culture, you know they share no affinity whatsoever with Japan.
Yeah.
And number two, it's maybe because the cars, your beloved Ford and Chev and Ford, GM, and Chrysler are garbage. That's allow me to rant a little bit here. It drives me nuts when Canadians talk about domestic cars.
What?
We don't have domestic cars. Every car in Canada, unless it actually came from a factory in Oshawa, is foreign. Every car. And there are just as many Japanese firms building cars in Southern Ontario as there are American ones. Drives me nuts when my father and his friends used to say that, talk about like domestic cars, our cars. No, they're not. You're buying a foreign car. You're buying an American car. It's no different to you than buying a German car, Swedish car, Japanese car, Italian car. They all come outside of Canada. We don't have domestic cars here.
No,
anyway,
but again,
it's
all part of the othering.
Again, like there's lots of places that have factories.
Yeah.
But it's not just the big three.
Yeah, no, I know.
The Japanese.
Oh no,
have
like
factories
Toyota had like in the 80s, you'd see decals made in Canada, assembled in Canada, Toyotas. Honda's been operating their Marysville, Ohio plant since 1983 or 84.
I don't think Japan actually sends cars to America.
They do. It depends on the models.
But most of their stuff is made in the United States.
Yeah, it like I say, it depends on the models. It depends on the manufacturers.
North American market.
Yeah, exactly.
Honda builds virtually everything for the North American market in Marysville, including motorcycles.
Yep. And Nissan has a factory.
Yeah, but they don't have everything. I think the pickups. It depends on like the Armadas and stuff. The big SUVs. Those in the rest of the world, those are patrols. So those are Japanese made. Land Cruiser.
Yeah, but Armada's not made in Japan.
Yeah, just because it's the current patrol.
Yeah, it's the North American version of the patrol.
Yeah, but it's the same as like Land Cruiser. Like all Toyota Land Cruisers are still made in Japan.
And they call them the luxury brand here.
Oh, the Lexus.
Lexus, thank you.
Yes, yeah. But
Lexus is Honda?
Toyota.
No, Toyota.
Acura is Honda. Infiniti is Nissan.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep.
I did not know these things.
Yeah. Just like Lincoln is Ford.
Well, I knew.
And Cadillac is GM. Yep. They're same frame, same. A lot of guys, it's not so much done now because everyone's wise to it and the prices have gone up. But these luxury cars really lose value after 5 to 8 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It used to be that, let's say you had an 8-year-old Lexus, it was the same price as an 8-year-old 4Runner. Like it's dropped in value. However, that Lexus, the drivetrain, that's a Toyota Land Cruiser. It's got impeccable off-road ability. Impeccable. It just got leather seats and, heated and cooling seats and all these luxury amenities to it. But that powertrain is going to get you anywhere off-road that you need to go.
Yeah.
So people were buying older Lexuses that had lost their value in the luxury market. Because if you buy luxury cars, you're not buying an 8-year-old one. If you're in that market, you're not in that market for an 8-year-old one or 9-year-old one with 165,000 kilometers on it. So guys were buying these, installing long travel kits on them, lifting up, putting on 33-inch tires, getting off-road bumpers made for them, and it's a Land Cruiser.
Well, yeah, and the level below the Land Cruiser, which is I think with the LH 560 or something, but there's an LH 470, which in the rest of the world is called the Prado.
Yes,
version, right, and that's only imported into North America as a Lexus. Yeah, but it's
still got very good off-road capability.
Yeah, it's because it's called the Land Cruiser Prado in the rest of the world, and so guys started realizing, wait a second, there's aftermarket support at the wazoo all around the world for this thing, and nobody realized. So when the luxury Lexus market plummeted,
when it ages out of the luxury market,
and Lexus values don't plummet the same way that Mercedes and BMW's value. No, your Mercedes will lose 95% of its value in 5 years. By the end of its lease,
really?
Oh yeah. Like a Mercedes that goes for $200,000. If you do a 5-year lease on it, by the time you come out of that lease, it'll be worth. You'd be lucky if it's worth 30 or 40.
No.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
My understanding,
I would have thought it'd at least be like say 90.
No, they're precipitous. It's Mercedes, especially Mercedes and BMWs. It just plummets.
Wow.
And it's
my understanding of Mercedes was the thing about it was that they were built like tanks. Like it was like buying
a high quality item.
It was like getting a King Tiger.
it's
of automobiles.
Mercedes,
the Germans had good quality.
Mercedes still has impeccable build quality, but the technology, the quality, and the sustainability of the technology hasn't kept up in modern cars. Like, so you take like an old, even like the W124s, which are. Those are actually going back up in value. And those are talking about like mid to late 80s, early 90s Mercedes. Those are the last ones that really had like a really great reputation for build quality. And anything prior to that, like what separated Mercedes from a Cadillac was a Cadillac. A Cadillac was a jumped up Chevy.
Yeah.
But a Mercedes had
was purpose
built like
designed.
A tank and everything
Purpose designed.
Fit, right?
Yeah.
And that's how Lexus started eating their lunch because like the first Lexus, the 450 or 400 actually was like their advertising campaign. They had two advertising campaigns. One was taking a ball bearing, a small ball bearing, and running it down like the hood lines to show that the panel gaps were just immaculate.
Yeah.
And another one was running the thing on a dyno at 125 miles an hour with a stack of champagne glasses on it.
Yeah,
and not having
them fall off.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember those ads.
Yeah, and that was and so those early Lexuses, long term quality on those, like
bulletproof.
Matt Farah from the Smoking Tire, he had one that they call it the $1 million Lexus. He eventually sold it, but he got this thing at like 800,000 clicks or something on that, and it's like, and he did a little bit of work to it, but it still ran really well. Yeah. And so he's like, let's get this thing over a mile. So he gave it to YouTuber until he could run it over 1 million miles.
Wow.
And that car's still running.
Wow.
And then he eventually sold it afterwards. Yeah. And
this was a Toyota?
Or, a Lexus. So
there was, I just read an article recently about a Nissan Frontier that belongs to a guy who's a courier down in California. So granted, a lot of it's freeway and highway miles, but he's over 1 million miles on his, like a 2013-14 Frontier. He's had to replace the driver's seat 3 times. Because he just compresses the foam on it from all the miles he puts on it. But but aside from regular maintenance, like he's had to change a couple of ball joints, struts, but and like oil and filter. He hasn't had a major failure in the engine yet. Like same alternator, like he's not burning oil.
That's the thing that gets me about. I mean, I've been. When I've been able to, I've sworn by Toyotas.
Yeah, I like Japanese cars.
So for 20, I think we got our first Toyota. I'm going to say 98, 97, 98.
Yeah.
I never looked back. Now, currently I'm driving a Jeep because
Cherokee.
I ended up with a Jeep. It's a Patriot.
Patriot, sorry.
But it's a stick, so
Yeah, you like stick?
So no one will steal it.
Yeah, the millennial anti-theft device.
But for the longest time, Toyotas were nice and cheap.
They were.
Right?
And they're not now.
And they were quality.
Yeah.
Right? So
now you pay Toyota tax.
When I went out to look at vehicles this last time, I ended up with this Jeep.
Yeah.
Right? I expected to find a good, couple of years.
Good luck.
Used Toyota. And
Toyotas lose like 2% of value a year, man.
And the value has gone up because they are not selling them cheap anymore. At some point, they figured out that they can charge premium.
You betcha.
And,
you can charge $10,000 more for a brand new Toyota than you can a brand new GM or a brand new Ford. And whatever market you're in.
And then so Hyundai slipped in to fill that void.
And Mitsubishi and Acura and Kia.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, but they've all moved up the chain too.
Yep.
Right?
Mitsubishi certainly has.
Hyundai has too.
Yeah. Mitsubishi is, again, like Toyota. I think they started I think their philosophy was, okay, we're going to break into this market by having bulletproof quality.
Yeah.
Like that 10-year bumper to bumper, no questions asked warranty. Like nobody could match that. And so Mitsubishi has a very solid reputation. You're not going to find a lot of people who say, I had a Mitsu and it was just a piece of crap. It was a lemon. You don't hear a lot of those stories. And of course, their prices have gone up accordingly. I don't think guys like Kia can. Is there another Korean maker? Yeah, Hyundai. I don't think Kia and Hyundai can match the quality of the Japanese yet. I think
pretty
there's
close.
still a tier down. They're close, but there's still a tier down. Mm-hmm. But again, I think that is how they decided to get a foothold into the American market. We're going to build a quality product, and we're going to undercut the big boys in price.
Well, exactly. They filled the void that
Toyota
did when they stepped up, right?
Yeah.
And my other impression is that, the price of cars, relatively speaking, have gone up.
Oh, way up since COVID.
Since the 90s, right? Like I don't recall cars costing as much of one's paycheck as they do nowadays, right? When it comes to the final bottom line.
I wonder if there's. I wonder if there's any data on that. I'm sure there is.
You could probably just ask the Google to compare the price of the average new automobile to the purchasing power of the dollar compared to.
I certainly think so with pickup trucks.
Yeah. Well,
the cost of brand new pickup trucks is ridiculous. It's insane. Like 6 figures for who does that? Who spends 6 figures?
Yeah, like top end
on an automobile.
Like top end, like Navigators and Cadillac Escalades. So the top end SUVs are both the top end of those are both over $100,000.
Well, like if you go to a brand new pickup truck, like a Long Ranch or Long Branch or
King Ranch.
King Ranch, and then what's the Dodge one?
It would be a Laramie.
Like the top end of the pickup truck. Yeah, they're all like 110, 120. Like
yeah. When you start going heavy duties and dealers.
I'm sorry, I don't understand who thinks that's like. To me, that's where the fool and the money got parted. There is no way even if you drive that vehicle till it piles up, you're not getting your money's worth out of it.
Well, yeah, because ultimately, like I don't need my vehicle to be too much of a statement. Like I said, if it's got stick, I'm good with it, right?
That's
if it's got air conditioning, then that's a nice little bonus, right? But I grew up with that.
That's something that, like, I got a friend who's a die-hard manual partisan, die-hard, and he believes a lot of things that are, frankly, like mechanics have told me that's a myth. Like for example, he believes that cabbies in Europe and say Latin America overwhelmingly use manual because the cobblestones will rattle automatic transmissions to pieces, and so you have to have a manual as it's more reliable in like a high vibration environment. And I've had mechanics tell me like, no, that's crap. That's what your suspension's for. It dampens all that shit. But he is that kind of an advocate. And he is now at the point that he will only buy a vehicle just for the manual transmission.
Yeah.
He no longer has a loyalty to Toyota or GM or anything like that. It's all about what can you get me that's manual.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I was bringing it up is because people have asked me, if you could have your dream car, if you asked me like, 30, 35 years ago, I was it's an Alfa Romeo Spider or something like that.
I think most people are like that.
Nowadays, I'm like...
anything with a stick, man.
What? I can't see
my
myself...
dream car is not a new car.
Same here.
I can't see myself driving a Lexus for the sake of owning a Lexus or a Merc or a Beamer. Well, Beamers and Audis in particular. Like I used to want a Beamer. Yeah. But now that like their drivers have such a reputation, it's like they're marketing to assholes.
Like Land Rover.
It's like... Yeah. Well, I will never, ever buy a Ram truck, just based on the drivers.
Just based on yes.
Oh yeah.
Because I deal with it all the time. If I get cut off, if I get passed on the right or passed on the shoulder,
it's either a pickup driver or it's a fucking Beamer.
It's a Ram driver.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Well, I have read stuff on that that Ram tends to be
they're the lowest price.
Yeah, the lowest price.
Yeah,
and so
the barrier to entry is the lowest.
That there is a relation between young men who are overly aggressive drivers.
Yes.
And because they have less experience on the road. Not as good, not as skilled as drivers, who overestimate their ability as drivers.
Yeah.
And they preponderantly, because they have lower incomes,
buy Rams.
Buy Ram pickup trucks.
Yeah. No, I get why it is.
Did you know, but I agree with you, like I find that most of the poorer drivers who overestimate their own abilities are pickup truck drivers because they're predominantly young men. But Interesting stat. Did you know that Ram pickup trucks overwhelmingly have more DUIs or involved in more DUIs and more fatal drunk driving accidents than any other vehicle?
That wouldn't surprise me.
Because
Based on how I see the drivers.
Because you're dealing with the same demographic.
And it's the same issues.
That's
right?
why we should ban Dodge Ram pickup trucks.
No.
Here we go.
Because if we ban Dodge Ram pickup trucks, there'll be less drunk driving incidents, right? Because it's not. It's
No, it'll just the F-150s will increase.
Well, we know that someone's being facetious.
I know.
Here.
I look at the gun control
I'm trying
legislation,
to be
and it makes
facetious as well.
perfect sense that if we ban guns, people will stop killing each other. Well, then let's ban the pickup truck because of the most drunk driving incidents, and the drunk driving will go down.
Dodge Ram pickup truck, the AR-15.
It's just
Out
a
of the
truck.
highway, yes.
It's just Ram now. They separate the Dodge off. Ram is its own division.
Ram. See, and this is the problem with the Ram lobby. The National Ram Association has been able to buy our political leaders with their hundreds of billions of dollars of lobbying funding, and that's why you're never going to get Dodge Rams or Rams banned off the road, because like the Ram lobby, the NRA just has way too much political power.
Between the Ram lobby and Big Hemi.
Oh yeah, that's a big Hemi. Oh God, those guys, they're part of the Illuminati. Yeah, right there. Big Hemi. That's good. That's good. Big Hemi. I love that. I love that.
For that one,
No, it just came to me actually.
Good one.
Where were we?
We were at Big Hemi.
Oh yeah, Big
Hemi.
Hemi.
Yeah.
The big lobby group. That was inspired.
You were talking about how the demographic that drives the Ram pickup trucks.
Yep.
They overestimate their abilities and stuff, but.
Well, just young men tend to overestimate their driving ability.
Well, my experience, and actually, when you texted today, well, let's think of things that we can just throw on the table. Like the whole concept of driving, and just behavior. And I was thinking this on the way here.
Mm-hmm.
Just getting stuck behind people. And it's the inane ways, and I do mean ways plural. Like you got these substrata of behavior. And drivers, just drives me insane, right? And you characterize it as, and you're right, young men tend to overestimate their abilities.
Yeah.
But to me, it's become a function of a lack of awareness of their surroundings, right? And I think that's where we're at. Again, this comes down to context and critical thinking in so many ways.
Do you think that they were better drivers in the past?
The way I've always described it, and I can't remember, again, I tend to repeat myself when I bring up adages, right? But I drove in Spain and Italy.
Yep.
In Spain in 2000, Italy in 2001. Mm-hmm. And when I was there, and we were driving rental cars both times.
Yeah.
Right? And it was a real adjustment.
Oh, yeah.
In Spain, the first year in particular, right? Because I drove like a North American for the first few days. And my first experience was it was in Barcelona, like the day we picked up our rental car. And funnily enough, signing all the paperwork. And the guy goes, "Oh." I said, "What?" He said, "It's a standard."
Right. Because
and I was
stereotypical North American does not drive standard.
And that was my first thing. And I'm like, so? He's like, "Oh, really?" I thought as a North American, that would be a problem for you. I said, "No, man, I learned how to drive on a Volkswagen camper, right?"
Yeah.
I can drive standard.
Yeah.
So that same day, we're trying to get I'm not out of Barcelona. I'm trying to get out of an alleyway.
Yeah.
Right. And the pedestrians are just
they
passing back and forth, back and forth.
You're waiting for a gap.
And I was waiting for a gap, and there wasn't one. And that was when it clicked in me.
Yeah.
That I had to not think like a North American.
Yeah, you just got to go.
Right? I just started creeping out, and eventually, they started going behind me, and I got out onto the street, right? But I was there for a good 5 to 10 minutes before I figured this out, right?
Yeah.
And it was this growing awareness. Like, a couple of days later, there's this high-speed highway. Mm-hmm. There was a ramp coming up to it, and for me to get to where I wanted to go, there was a ramp on the other side of this high-speed highway. Mm-hmm. So I had to cross this 50 feet so I came up to this highway, stopped, had to get across it. There were no stoplights. There was a stop sign, right? And there was always traffic coming. I was like, I had to pucker up and just floor it and get across there before somebody hit me, right? And it was just, again, that system was designed for people who could think that way.
Right.
And so the comparison I had at the time was, okay, European drivers, Spaniards and Italians in particular, drive like maniacs.
Yep.
But they all know that they drive like maniacs.
Yeah.
And they have that awareness.
So it's baked into the cake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next year when I realized I had missed my turn, it was supposed to be a 90-degree turn and another 90-degree turn.
Yep.
Right? And I had missed that. So I went and did like a 120-degree turn 50 meters down the road. Yeah. Right? And I had to swing right into oncoming traffic to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got lots of honks and stuff like that, but I didn't hit anyone. No one hit me because they all expected.
They all expect someone to make a very aggressive move.
Stunned dumbass to do that, right? Yeah. So my comparison at the time was, okay, by contrast, Edmonton drivers don't drive like maniacs.
Yep. And they don't expect others to drive like maniacs.
And they don't have the awareness, but they don't need it.
Yeah.
Right? What's happened in that time since is now people drive like maniacs. They still don't have the fucking awareness. Right?
So I don't think we drive like maniacs. I don't think that.
I see examples of
there's just enough people that Ram drivers.
Ram drivers.
Who are like, especially when traffic's slow, right? Like it's there's some kind of thing and just some dickhead in a Ram will just take the median and down.
Or they're weaving in and out, right? Nobody seems to know what a following distance is anymore. Right?
Again, do you think this is different, say, from the 1970s?
Absolutely. Like, time
was okay. That people in the 1970s did know what a following distance was?
I think the following distance thing comes just from congestion. Because if you go to Ontario, like if you go out on the 401, and as much as it pains me to do this, I have to commend people who drive in the Metro Toronto area because they're very polite and they're very good. And like, driving a truck through Metro Toronto down the 401 or the Don Valley Parkway or whatever, you turn your signal on, someone will make room for you. That does not happen here in Alberta.
Oh, yeah?
But they don't have following distance there because they don't have room for it. It's just congestion. Right?
Yeah. No, I think that is part of what's happening. And I would say that's
majority of it. I don't think we're worse or any better than any other generation. No. It's our for number one, more cars on the road.
Yeah.
The speed available to cars is higher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than what it was than the average sedan could do in the 1970s. Handling, suspensions, brakes are better.
Yeah.
So it is less punishing of driver error than say it was in the past.
Well, I don't know,
but I don't think we're any worse or better than previous generations.
I think the congestion is a factor.
Absolutely.
Right? Because I remember back in the day, you would have following distance. Right, you would have a safer following distance
because there was just fewer cars on the road.
Right. Nowadays, I think it does tie into driver attitudes. The other attitudes of the other drivers is you leave following distance. That's just an invitation for someone's
going to come into it,
right?
Yeah.
So you're always going to end up with no following distance, right? But when I talk about you talk about people overestimating their abilities, and I'm talking about awareness. I'm talking about the people who are driving along, so they're either deliberately doing this because they're dickheads, or they are just suddenly realizing, oh fuck, I'm in the left lane. I want to be taking that ramp 4 lanes over, right? And I've got 100 meters to do it, right? And they'll just cut off everybody else to do it, as if that's just the most natural thing in the world to do.
I can almost always see that coming too. Like I don't know if it's just because like.
Oh yeah,
I was just thinking on it. Like I've been a truck driver, or had my truck driving license for almost 28 years now. So I'm just like,
so you've seen it.
You can watch it, and you can just see a guy, and you see that guy's going to do a right turn from the left lane. I just know, and it's sure enough.
I'm going to say that again. I got no data on this, but I'm prepared to lay money on it. That this was not more common in, say, 1969 than it is now. The difference is we have more exit lanes. We have more freeways. We see this tendency more.
I disagree.
We have the Yellowhead now. We have the White Mud now. We have the Henday now. And they've got a lot more overpasses and cloverleafs on them now than we did in 1969. So that's why we see it more. There's just more opportunities for it to happen.
No, to me, it's behavioral. Right?
Well,
I can remember
what's changed. What makes our behavior? What in our society makes people inherently worse drivers now than 40 years ago?
The same thing that makes them assholes on. It's exactly the same thing that makes them assholes online, right?
The anonymity of it.
Yeah,
it's partly the anonymity.
But we had anonymity in our cars in 1969.
Yeah, but there's, like I said, there are no. We're living in a society now, and I don't just blame young people, right? Youth are always going to be youth, as you've pointed out, right? What's changed these days, they are youth within a society that now doesn't understand what inconvenience is, doesn't understand what consequences are.
Or patience.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Right? So they're just doing what they want when they want to, right? And so the reason I'm disagreeing with that has not been my experience. Just going back in my memory. No, purely anecdotal.
Right.
But
like I said, we're prisoners of our own perception.
at some time in the 80s or 90s, I remember driving, I was eastbound on the White Mud.
Eastbound and down.
And coming up on 91st Street exit, right? And past that and headed towards 75th. There was some idiot in a sports car of some sort. And he was reversing down the shoulder, down the right-hand shoulder. Because he had,
he was on the shoulder. What are you complaining about?
because he had missed the 91st Street turnoff.
Yeah.
Right? Now, I remember that striking me at the time, going,
Good God.
like, fuck off. Right? What kind of self-absorbed fucking prick does bullshit like that? Right? Like,
As
because
opposed to just going down to 75th.
yeah,
and
just
doing
go to
the-
75th,
just double back.
turn right, and
come back,
and double back.
like a rational person would do.
Like I
right?
had to do today. I missed my turnoff. Or not only did I miss the turnoff, but I took the wrong one. I took the one going westbound into the city. And so I'm booting down, I think it was...
Sure, Parkview.
would have been White Mud. And there was a gap in the freeway, and I could have whipped the shitty.
Oh, yeah. That's where the photo radar guy sits.
And I thought, nah, I won't do that. That's too dodgy. I'll just go down to 17th Street and just turn around. I had to think about
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
Right? And that's why
But people will do that.
Oh, yeah.
I've
You
seen-
can,
I've
you
sure
can
I've
see
seen-
all the tracks
Yeah.
in the snow. Oh, yeah. People do that all the
the
time.
preponderance of people that just do stupid things like the swinging across
The thing-
4 lanes of traffic to get
Yeah.
to the off ramp that
The
they
Cal- the
poorly
Calif-
planned for.
The
right?
California lane change.
Yeah.
But the thing that I think that I see that most I don't know if bolsters his argument or not, but or if it's just always been true is just people's failure to engage with the fact that they're entering onto a freeway until they're
Yes.
at the lines.
Yes.
Right? Like, dude, I'm on the on-ramp. The on-ramp is not the freeway.
Yeah.
I'm on the on-ramp.
Like, oh, geez, now I
crap,
got to
I'm
accelerate. Yeah.
The speed limit here is 100. I'm doing 40.
Yeah. Like, oh, my goodness. Yes.
Well,
And-
I had, again, one of the reasons I wanted to have this is, or I thought this could be a subject, and I'm laughing inside because this is where we eventually got to from where we started,
Yeah.
which was
We're starting with dating.
losing.
Gen Z dating.
At what age
Yeah.
are what percentage of youth
Yeah.
losing their virginity these
Yeah.
days compared to the 70s? I was on 149th and coming up to the White Mud. It's a 60 zone. The idiot in front of me is doing 40. Coming on to the on ramp, which is going to be 80.
Yeah.
And so there's a reason it's 60. We could be doing 70 because no one's going to do you for that, right? But you're doing 40.
Yeah.
And he gears up to 60 for getting into the 80 zone. And it's like, for fuck's sake.
And this,
like,
and then of course this causes, I forget the name of it, but it's a term to do with a wave, in that this guy hits the 80 speed limit doing 60, 65.
Yeah.
So then the guy approaching him has to brake.
Yeah. And
So he slows down to 75, 70.
the caterpillar effect was what
and
we
then
called
it goes
it.
further and further and further back. And
Yeah, the
like
caterpillar
because
effect.
that's what we called it, ruck marching, right? It was a caterpillar.
Yeah, I was going to bring it up when we were doing
Yeah.
ruck march or webbing march.
I used to drive down the Twiller, or not Twiller, Henday, or for those not from them, just a main freeway,
ring road.
Ring road.
And there would come a point where we would be stopped, dead stop, on the freeway.
Yeah.
And first couple of times that happened, I thought, there must be an accident up ahead or some blockage. There wasn't.
No, this is right around the Stony Plain Road.
Or Terwilliger. On the
on
Terwilliger corner.
Terwilliger.
Yeah. And so I'd be heading south on the ring road. And get to this point in the southwest corner of the city. And where, the ring road starts, instead of moving south, now starts to move east.
Back
Yeah.
east.
And we'd be at a dead stop. And I think, I'm assuming there's a blockage, there's an accident, there's something. And so then when I finally get moving again, there wasn't. There was no stoppage, there was no accident, there was no construction, there was no nothing. And I thought, why does this happen? So I started, trying to figure this out. And that's what it is. It's more cars than what the road capacity is.
Yeah.
And that people driving too slow.
It's really bad, actually. There's two places it's really bad on the Henday at rush hour.
Mm-hmm.
If you're on the south side of the city, going westbound, from the Calgary Trail Gateway interchange, where that comes on, then there's 111th Street, and there's one in between. But anyway, there's three accesses. Well, yeah, so it's people coming north off of Highway 2, people coming south on Calgary Trail. They come on, and then 111th Street comes on right after. And it all too close. And every day from probably 3:45 till about
5:30,
5:30-ish,
5:45.
that place turns into a parking lot.
Yeah.
On the north side of the city, it's Campbell Road.
Yes.
I don't know why Campbell Road.
Yeah.
It's just one exit. And the St. Albert trailer is a little bit further back.
But I'm going to guess it's people coming from St. Albert and people coming up 156 at the same time.
No, but Campbell Road where it gets onto the Henday.
Yeah.
The Henday always...
There's a lot of traffic all coming into
right where it merges
that junction,
there.
It
anyway, turns into a parking lot.
Somebody gets on doing 65 in the 80 zone, so this guy slows down to 75. The guy behind him has to brake further. The guy behind him is now having to brake to 65. The guy behind him down to 60, and then it just it's like a backlash or a backdraft effect until 200 cars down, somebody's got to stop.
Yeah.
And that's what it is.
And it gets magnified if one of those guys is a truck.
Yeah.
Like a tractor trailer, right? Because,
And that's all it is.
Yeah, to slow him down and then to start it again.
Yeah.
Get up and run.
Like it's,
Yeah. So it's just a matter of more cars than what the road was designed to handle.
Yeah.
And those cars not efficiently merging, like trying to merge at too slow a speed.
Yeah.
No, there's no question. Yeah. Well, and and you were talking about how Steve, you were mentioning before how you watch for this stuff. That you can see this shit happen.
Yeah. And also you're higher up in the truck, so you can see further ahead.
You
can see it developing.
But you just sometimes you see a vehicle and you just something about it, right?
You recognize the trends. It's pattern recognition.
Yeah, it's pattern recognition, and I can't always articulate it, but you just see like, that guy's going to guy's going to make a right exit from the left lane. I can just tell.
Yep. Well, you watch that guy, and then sure enough, 3 out of 10 times he does it. Yeah.
So sometimes you can look at all the factors, all the players involved, right? So you can be 3-lane highway, on ramp coming on the right hand side. There's 2 vehicles coming on. You got yourself and 2 other vehicles in front of you in the right-hand lane, because I want to take the next exit after that, right? You got 2 stun dummies coming up on your left-hand side, right, doing their own thing, and another couple of guys in the fast lane on the far left, right? Now, if everyone's aware, right, the guys in front of me are making space for those 2 vehicles to get in.
Yeah.
Right? The guys on my left are slowing down so that I can move over.
Yeah.
Right? Or some of us can move over. And the other guys out there on the far left are speeding up.
Yeah, to make room for the other guys who want to get in behind them. Yeah.
Instead, what's happening is the guy in front who's trying to merge is doing 60, as previously discussed. The guy behind him is riding his ass like a motherfucker.
Yep.
Because he wants to be doing 90.
Yeah. So he's like on his bumper.
The other 2 idiots aren't doing anything. They're just blocking it. The other guys are passing me, so no one can move over to the left to make room for these guys. I'm the only one. right? I'm the only one. I'm slowing down, and I'm kind of like, okay, I'm going to leave a lot of space between me and hope the idiot behind me doesn't run into my ass.
Well, again, I'm going to say that I think probably our grandparents had these exact same tendencies and these exact same instincts in their driving. The difference is that we have a lot more freeways to express those same habits and instincts.
Yeah, freeways that were built 20 years ago without taking into account the fact that congestion was going to get worse and volume was going to get worse. They were built for 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they didn't anticipate, like the sudden growth in the population of the city.
Just be happy you don't live in Winnipeg.
Why is that?
I'm happy I don't live in Winnipeg for a whole bunch of reasons. Winnipeg is one of
the first cities to have come up with the perimeter highway idea.
Okay, like
right?
the ring road.
In Canada, the ring road, right? Mm-hmm. 94, I lived in Winnipeg for a winter.
My condolences.
Yeah. It was like up to that point, like the worst winter in recorded history.
Yeah,
it
gets cold in the peg.
Yeah. Anyway, so they've had the perimeter highway.
Yep.
So the perimeter highway only goes about 3/4 of the way around Winnipeg, and then you got to dodge. And then they've actually, well, now they've put it. It's all connected. It's not a limited access highway yet. There's still like places you can just turn right onto the perimeter highway. It's got traffic, especially in the southern portion of it.
Yeah.
It's got a whole whack of traffic lights.
Yeah.
And it was there. Like when I was there in '94, it was 3/4 of the way around, and then it was the northeast quadrant that wasn't completed yet, and that quadrant's still not completed.
Yeah,
it's the road has been done, but the overpass over La Jamodier Boulevard has not been completed. The last time I was there, and this was before a pebble of asphalt had been laid down for the Anthony Day. Right, and I was back there. Like 6 years ago, I was through there every week when I was hauling hydrogen for Air Liquide, and it was.
I remember.
I was just like, how has this not gotten any better? Like
I remember having to drive in Winnipeg quite a bit. Like I was there every month, and it was not a fun city to drive in. Yeah,
and there's no internal freeways in Winnipeg, right?
There was a couple, but they weren't that great.
Like Calgary's got the Deerfoot that goes right to the city, north to south. Edmonton. Got the white mud.
Edmonton really didn't have any north-south routes. It still doesn't really.
No, it doesn't really.
Well, we've got
17th Street and 170th.
We've got Grote.
Yeah, Grote.
Grote, which becomes St. Albert Trail. But I mean,
but
you still have to deal with the university.
And it's not a freeway.
No.
It's just a main route.
Yeah.
Like we've got 17th Street or 66th, 75th, Grote, and 170th. But they're not freeways. They're main roads.
Yeah.
But they're not.
Yeah, they're not freeways.
Yeah, they're not freeways.
75th is for a while.
Yeah, I mean,
once it becomes the old Capilano, now Wayne Gretzky.
Yeah, exactly. A little bit. But,
I mean, Edmonton could be laid out a lot better. But
yeah, it certainly could.
Because I remember our old CO Buick, he used to complain about.
Yeah.
We got the white mud, but it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it goes from the south side to the west end, and it is actually kind of important
for the people who live there.
Well, and for economic, because the two major industrial areas in the city are south side, west end.
Exactly.
Thing, right? So it connected those.
But I think hoping for good traffic planning out of the city of Edmonton
ain't gonna happen.
I think out of any city.
Yeah, to be honest, municipal governments I think tend to be overwhelmingly poor.
But if you would allow me to segue to a new subject.
Okay, absolutely.
This is my thing I've been thinking about this week.
Okay.
Technocrats.
Yep. Like big tech?
No. Technocrats, like in the progressive sense of the word.
Like as in
a government by experts and stuff like that.
Yes.
Supposed experts. Here's my thing.
Yes.
My current reasoning for why you should not trust, and it's not just technocrats, but experts as a whole.
Experts in general, yes.
Is say you get the 100 leading physicists.
Yep.
And physics is a field with lots of specialization.
Yep.
And you put them all in a room, and they're, if they all were Nobel laureates.
Yeah.
What percentage of what there is to know about physics do those people collectively know? Do you think it's 10%?
If that,
right?
I was at the beginning of the road with physics, aren't we?
I was thinking about my own expertise. Mm-hmm. Like I say, I've been a trucker for almost 30 years, and I was thinking about this week, and I'm like, I maybe know 40% 5% of the total of what there is to know about trucking, and that's probably being pretty fucking generous.
Okay.
I've never ice road trucked. I've never pulled road trains, but I have pulled extended length turnpikes. I've never hauled logs.
Yep.
You know, I have hauled fuel. I have hauled, you know, stuff I've done in the oil patch. But, you know, environmental science is in its infancy, right? Computer science is very much in its infancy.
Yep.
Right? We just bitched about traffic planning. That's professions for people. So if you start to ask people, so you were talking earlier about what the hell? Anyway, but like figures of speech, like this guy knows all there is to know about X. Nobody knows all there is to know about anything.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't matter how long he's been doing, how long he's an expert, right? Nobody. So, and I think it is the experts based on something that is the complete knowledge,
corpus of knowledge? Or?
The complete corpus of knowledge is probably a fraction of what's actually available to know about any given subject.
Right.
We just haven't learned it yet.
Right.
Okay.
Ideally.
So even the people who know the most
would be ideally the people who know the most would be the most aware of that.
But they're not, I don't think. In a lot of fields they aren't, for sure.
Yeah, in a lot of fields, particularly that of public policy.
Yeah. So the whole this is my why you shouldn't trust experts and why government by technocrats is a bad idea, and this is why I've been on this week. So
okay,
discuss.
Oh, okay. What I was waiting for. Well, your take,
it's
Steve.
It's only a hypothesis, right? It's from my point of view because I can't back it up. I haven't done a lot of research. Right?
No,
it's literally a hypothesis that nobody knows, or you know, when we say, "Oh, these good people are the most knowledgeable," I'm like, okay, but in the grand scheme of things, they're barely more knowledgeable than the average person.
In the grand scheme,
based on the knowledge available that we haven't learned yet, right? Versus
at the same time, and not
which
isn't to refute what you just said. You're right. In the grand scheme of things, they know a little more. On the other hand, in a lot of ways, they know infinitely more than the average person.
Okay, but my point is that
do they know enough to effectively govern based on that expertise?
Well, but we don't. If they, I mean, we're dealing with the known unknowns or the unknown unknowns.
Yep.
Sorry, but the unknown unknowns. But so you got to understand that the opportunity for error is still very high, even if the decision is made by the most knowledgeable person alive. That the percentage. This might, I guess, the crux of my hypothesis. The chance of that person being wrong is a lot higher than probably even that person believes.
Okay, so let's. I mean, context is important, obviously.
Sure. I mean, like it varies from field to field
to a certain degree. So, offhand, my first response would be that if you've got 100 of them in the room, right, that you know the main thing is going to be they're all going to agree on X, right? There's going to be a certain body of data that they're all going to agree because that's what it was. That's what's always been. You know, like so. Those are the fundamentals, and they'll have all grown up with, learned those same fundamentals, and that's core to their understanding. The concern, or you know, the challenge that comes with that is what happens when those fundamentals change. You know, for instance, if some public policies were dependent on the fact that we had 9 planets in our solar system and not 8. Right. And that was...
Are we back to 9 again? Didn't they decide?
I don't know.
They changed their mind.
I don't know what the
again.
status of Pluto is. I don't know.
I heard they changed their mind again or something.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, is Pluto a planet or a planetoid?
Well, good, because God damn it, Pluto should be a planet, as far as I'm concerned.
He's a good dog.
Good dog, yeah.
You know, so what happens then, right? You know, it's solid until it's not solid, right? So there's that, right?
I'm going to throw in to say that this has come into focus of late because of 2 considerable phenomena, both of which are going to be throwing ripples across society for a long time.
Okay.
The first one and the one, the knock on. No, I'll start at the beginning. COVID.
Yeah.
COVID, our response to COVID was dictated completely by unelected experts.
Yeah.
And there's a very large body of opinion that says now, in hindsight, they were wrong. They weren't just wrong, they were spectacularly wrong.
Yeah.
And they refused to admit they were wrong, and this caused a huge amount of damage and harm.
Yeah.
The second, where we're kind of at the beginning of that, is on our policy to global warming, where experts are trying to impose a set of policies upon society, which is, I guess, living in the shadow of COVID, where there is now a mistrust of experts, and it has a similar context in that the policy recommendations of the experts are harmful to a great number of people. Mm-hmm. And so there is that resistance to it. And again, the experts refuse to acknowledge the possibility that they might be wrong. And to those of us who are not experts, or not experts who have that ability to influence public policy, we tend to interpret this as hubris. We tend to interpret this as arrogance and an overestimation of their own ability. But I think it really, really comes, I'm not saying this is new. I'm not saying this is recent. I think this has been building for a time. For example, why didn't experts predict the 2008 economic crash? Like, that's something that came out. One of my favorite sources on this topic was the book Wrong. It was called Wrong: Why Experts Keep Failing Us and How to Know When Not to Trust Them by David Freeman, where this look at experts who are supposedly able to advise public policy have a track record of, on the whole, being wrong. And, this has been building for a time, but it really entered the public consciousness starting at about, what was the third wave of COVID? 2020?
Think so.
Yeah. To me, the third wave is really the sea change.
Mm-hmm.
So
the Omicron wave?
No, before that. It was before Omicron.
No, I think Omicron was the third.
Yeah, that's what I always think it was the third. But.
Maybe. It was somewhere, I think it was before Omicron. Well, maybe.
Anyway.
You know what? I'll retract that. Because it's kind of a gradual process. It's not like I can point to a day on the calendar. So yeah, I'm going to say it's a continuum in there. We're slowly building. But anyway, I'll throw that back to you guys. Or do you need me to? I see you're both kind of doing some research there. So I'll keep going on this.
Carry on. Yeah.
This has been something that's been building, but again, there is now a broader lack of trust in experts and expert opinion now, as a result of the COVID fiasco. Mm-hmm. That maybe there was a certain amount of leeway that experts were given prior to 2019 that they simply do not have now, and there is a resentment, I think, within the expert class that they don't have the same prestige, they don't have the same authority, moral authority, mm-hmm. and they don't have the same social clout that they used to, and there is a resentment of that. When I look at their kind of when I look at their quotes in literature and whatnot, the way they view themselves, the academics are the primary source of our experts, or academia. The academy is our primary source of experts, and when you look at their own internal communications, I think that's very prevalent, where they resent what they consider to be an anti-academic bias in a lot of, say, media or popular culture.
It's yours, I got a shitload of
Let her rip, buddy. Let her rip.
Okay. Let her rip. So, I mean, you're right. Fauci came to mind immediately. Mm-hmm. As soon as we start talking,
his role in the whole thing, at least from a North American perspective, I don't know how Europeans feel about this, but certainly his role.
He was certainly
was outsized.
He was a hot point. He was such a hot point.
Well, and I don't think our chief medical officer for Canada,
Hinshaw.
Teresa Tam,
Hinshaw,
Alberta,
none of them had.
They didn't really deviate meaningfully from his recommendations or from the
no,
C.
no
as
one
far
did.
as I could tell.
So
he had an outsized influence for sure.
I think he did. Yeah.
He had a massive influence,
Yeah.
right? So I'll try and do this in a logical order,
Okay.
right, and respond to these things. But first of all, we're living in anti-intellectual times. I'm as opposed to anti-academic. I think to a certain extent, if you talked to me 5-10 years ago, I had a problem with academia just kind of pontificating from their ivory towers and just specifically in terms of climate change and stuff like that, because you can't just declare shit, and you certainly can't declare it using scientific language, right?
Or declare that the science is settled.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's ultimately, I think, your question, right? We'll get back to that more broadly, right? Whether the science is settled or not. Like, do we have to keep debating this? Because there's a time sensitivity to some of these things. And so, but we live in anti-intellectual times. I think that's something that came with the Trump administration, with the rise of populism. There's
There's got nothing to do with your comment. It's my coffee.
we live
Sorry.
in ugly times. It's
Do you think it started in 2016? I kind of think it started much earlier.
I think so too.
Yeah, I think
we've been building towards it.
the anti-intellectualism, I think, definitely predates Trump. Definitely.
Yeah, but he certainly helped it along, right? He made it.
Embraced it.
But
he embraced. He was the
and he had
first
the
leader
audience.
to embrace it. But I think
Right.
that audience was ready to hear that.
Well, yeah,
that
because that's what
message.
populism is. So it just kind of
Way
accelerated onto itself.
But
right?
I think there was a lot. At least I think or at least the left accusing the people of anti-intellectualism, even way back into the into the Bush 43 administration.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And he was like the ultimate anti-intellectual, right?
But I mean,
Yeah.
And as a lot of people have pointed out, the times we live in with the social media and everyone being able to Google whatever they want, come up and just interpret it into their own echo chamber if they so choose.
Yeah.
And everyone seems to be doing that.
You know what? That is a factor, isn't it?
Yeah.
We didn't have access to just that kind of information that we have today. Like, we didn't have access to that in 91.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go to the library and find it.
Yeah.
But it took hours because you had to find the book, the source, go find it on the shelf. Where now we just type it in and it's instantly to us.
And
wherever
the
we
other
are.
thing is when you had to read the book, you got a lot more context.
Yeah.
As opposed to finding the paragraph in
That you're looking for.
right?
for.
For.
So,
Well, I'm thinking more of a technical thing.
But no, true.
Yeah.
but you can refine your search with the terms that you use. The internet at large is now geared to knowing you somewhat, that when it knows you type in your specific things, it knows what you're
you
looking
wanna
for. So it's
find,
going to
yeah.
give you, you're going to
Yeah.
see the 3 or 4 things on your screen.
Yeah.
Right. And again, we're living in times where people are not trained for context or critical
Yeah.
thought anymore. It's all about being in your echo chamber. And so this anti-intellectualism has reached the point where people are just, I know better, right? Because I think differently, therefore, and here's this thing that kind of reflects what I'm thinking. I could very well be right, and therefore I'm going to choose to be right, and I'm going to refute anything that is contrary to what I'm saying. And that is all over the place. That's not just the woke. I mean, I'm seeing so much of that from the right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. We see that on both sides of the aisle.
I do want to say that, like, my hypothesis isn't intended to be anti-intellectual as much as it's more like a
policy formation by experts.
No,
as
and-
opposed
well,
to
but it's more like
elected representatives.
there's not a lot of epistemic humility,
Yes, I would
right?
agree with you on that.
right?
Yep.
And so maybe it's
Yep.
understanding that you need to just take what experts say with a grain of salt.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And I guess to ask, or not to ask for, it's to, from my point of view, like, that is why an open source, individualistic individuals as part of the collective method of decision making is better than the technocrat at the top. A bottom up decision making process will come to a better decision than a top down one.
Well, I generally agree with you on that,
Like,
and there's no circumstances.
And like somebody pointed out with maybe it was a Peterson podcast I was listening to recently. He said if you take like two groups of 10 people specialized in the field, you fill one group with 10 people who are all like experts in the field, and you fill the second group with 9 people who are experts and one person who doesn't know a thing about what they're doing. The group with 9 people will produce a better result than the group with the 10 experts.
Because they'll generate better discussion.
In the process of having to explain it to the person who doesn't know anything, they work it out for themselves.
Yeah,
a lot better.
I totally believe that. How many times have you heard the phrase, especially in military circles, if you want to learn something, teach it?
Yeah.
Because by having to break it down and
Absolutely.
explain it, forcing you to do that
Absolutely
reveals a new understanding to you.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
You
That
actually
makes
have to go
perfect
through
sense.
the thought process. But of course, and I think the reason we're discussing at the moment anti-intellectualism, it's in context of what Patty brought up.
Yeah.
Right.
But-
It's not about your original question, right?
Yeah.
But it does play into things, right? And so since we ended up on the Fauci thing, for me, oh man, getting back to the COVID thing. I mean,
It was a seminal event.
In the case, unfortunately, it's a reflection of the times we were living in, where we ended up with it. Right, in different times, like 100 years ago, this wouldn't have been an issue. Right. My first question is, who else are you going to turn to? Second of all, with the seriousness of the implications, right? There was a time sensitivity to it, right? So there's the potential that we're looking at a very serious problem and we need a very serious solution and we need it quickly, right? We don't have time to debate, right? This was a thankless fucking task. It was better, in my opinion, it will always have been better to overreact than underreact to it, at least until there was some understanding. Now, looking back at it, from the limited experience that I had of COVID, it is my general impression, based on nothing at all, that maybe we overreacted.
Right? See, and I would disagree with you on your always better. I think if you look statistically, if you go back through things, it's almost always like there'll be one time maybe there'll be an extinction level event that you need to, but almost always it's better to do nothing.
I think Trent had he had a really good qualification at the end of it, that it was better to overreact. In other words, it was a precautionary principle. Let's play it safe. Let's overreact until we have more info and, to make a better decision.
Yeah.
And that's where the wheels fell off.
The wheels fell off.
The more info came in other words, we had enough experience with the lockdown to know it's not helping. We had enough experience with school closures to know they're not helping. We had enough experience with masks to know they're not helping. And we also knew that they had negative consequences in other fields.
Yeah.
But the experts, the public health authorities, doubled down and refused to admit they were wrong. And that's where the problem
again,
was.
to throw my priors out there, it seems to me like the biggest lack of epistemic humility is in the public sector. Like, when was the last time, especially in messaging, right? Especially in messaging, when was the last time you heard an elected leader admit a mistake?
Yes.
Right.
To be fair, the vast majority of experts are in the public sector.
Yeah.
I mean, the nature of public sector work is what attracts experts, right?
But that's who we turn to in
But
an example like
I've
this,
never.
Or that's what the public sector is drawn to, is experts. Private sector has a different form of problem solving.
Yeah, but I mean, in part to answer what you're saying.
Well, in a private sector, a company that makes a mistake and just keep keeps making it doesn't last.
They don't last.
Right? If they don't have the humility to say, okay, this is wrong,
right.
we got to change course, it's gone.
And they
it
get much faster feedback.
Yeah.
And that the quarterly balance sheet comes out, you know right away what you're doing is working or not.
Yeah.
Whereas the public sector is immune to that.
Yeah.
But in answer to what you were saying about, okay, when was the last time a political leader admitted a mistake? They don't. They don't. And that's part of the times we live in. And that started, and I think we've discussed this before. I saw it started happening with Bush 1 saying, if you're not with us, you're against us.
Like in relation to...
I think that was in relation to... I'm pretty sure it was Bush 1, and it was in relation to...
I think it was 2.
Was it Bush 2?
Was it Bush 2?
It was about 2 when he wanted to invade Iraq.
Yeah, I think that's how I remember.
And the only reason I know that is because it came up on another podcast this weekend.
Gotcha.
Yeah, when he was campaigning.
Well, then I saw before that, or around the same time with Chrétien, Chrétien was the first sign I saw that he would only respond to something if public opinion was significantly turning against him.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And that's why I first started to see that. And now that the times we live in, the politics are such that no one can make a mistake because the opposition is all about the other guy. It's always all about the other. There is no integrity in politics anymore, right? It's, and this is what it pisses me off about the left or the right. Well,
was there ever?
There was a certain amount of honor to it.
Really?
Back in the day.
When?
Right?
Like?
Back in the 80s and 90s. You talk to the politicians back then.
Give me names.
Joe Clark has mentioned it.
Why? What did he do that was so honorable? Other than consistently and reliably losing.
And Mulroney spoke about it. They both spoke about the same thing. They both spoke about the same thing. Hang on.
That dude was... Okay.
Right?
Choke it back. Okay.
I've heard it from liberals. I've heard it...
Mulroney was as crooked as a scoliotic snake.
Oh, he was crooked as a dog's hind leg.
They talked about... There was a dignity to the process. There was a respect to the process. And politics, in my experience back in the day, it was issue driven and it was results driven, right? So if there was something that like a government did, even if you were typically on the other side of the aisle, you weren't hammering away at stuff. You could admit that
like
this thing was okay
for the sake of opposition.
Yes. Right?
I would struggle to think of a single era like that. I can't imagine one.
I don't remember it being as ugly as these days. Like, everything's about it. It's about the appearance.
It's uglier now because the narrative is different. The narrative has now become, if you're not on my side, you're evil.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. And the narrative wasn't always
break it down to morality.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, it was about effectiveness.
So yeah, you can say in the 80s, 90s, 70s, 60s, whatever it was. Yeah, it was my friend in the opposition. We disagree.
Yes.
About, right?
Yes. Yeah, and yes, today
so now
politics is framed in moral terms.
And you'd say, and you saw it this past week when they were talking about the Chinese influence on the candidates and certain campaigns, right? In the rhetoric that was being thrown around, it's this. I won't even call it passion. It's just this vitriolic anger being thrown back and forth, and it's just insulting the other side, right? And it's gotten to the point where I'll see a headline for a National Post article, and just the way that the headline is worded is like Trudeau this, that, and the other fucking thing. I'm like, well, of course you're going to say that because you're the National Post, and this is how you see Trudeau, right?
The worst part is lately I've been seeing articles in the Globe and Mail that I thought would be National Post headlines.
Yeah, that is quite surprising. How what normally friendly liberal.
Well, the Globe, I've noticed a lot of that in the last
how they've really
2 years.
turned on Trudeau big time. Anyway, sorry,
right?
That's a digression.
But
that's what we do.
Yes.
Sorry,
you were talking about the vitriolic, the pure partisanship of politics today.
As you guys know, I'll admit I'm not a huge fan of Trudeau the Younger now. Right? I don't like his governing style.
I think he's swell.
No, you don't.
Okay, I like my dog.
But I don't, I've got no time for just this incessant whatever. I'm going to find whatever I can to cut down Trudeau, right? If you're just looking for stuff to cut down Trudeau, stick to the stuff that actually matters. Like, don't go looking for stuff. Don't go making issues,
think
right?
That the Chinese interference matters?
I do. Right? And I don't think he's handled it very well. But when the National Post has a point to make that I agree with, it gets lost, and I'm just used to Poilievre. I'm used to the Conservative Party. I'm used to Conservative supporters. I'm just used to everyone just, Trudeau's bad. And it's gotten down to Trump-like insults nowadays. It's just people just questioning his parentage. Oh, like Castro was his father, and it's like, for fuck's sake, really?
Trump,
like, this
what would the Trump nickname for Trudeau be? Castro Jr.?
Oh, probably
Junior Castro.
Little Fidel.
Yeah, little
Fidel. Yeah,
probably something like that. Probably.
I mean, these are just the times we live, and in a lot of ways, it's giving the people what they want. We're so polarized. People are just looking for stuff to jump on, looking for something to feed on. It's a fucking feeding frenzy these days, So yeah, getting back to your question, is there a politician who's admitted anything? No, because if you admit you're wrong these days in the social media age, you are going to get lacerated.
I think what I would have liked to have seen, just as using COVID as an example of, because COVID was a quickly evolving situation.
Yeah.
If the premier had said, okay, so Dr. Hinshaw will give a briefing every day, and every Wednesday I'll get up, and after being in consultation with everyone, we'll do the press conference of what we thought to be true, but we no longer believe to be true about this, because this is an evolving situation. So
yeah.
So every Wednesday would be this is what we were wrong about.
Yeah. Yeah, that would have been nice.
Right?
I think that would have been refreshing.
That would have been absolutely, and nobody would have faulted him for that. Right?
I do think
no one should. I think plenty of people would. He would have gotten hammered left and right, like he eventually ended up being hammered left and right anyway.
Yeah, but he didn't admit any of the things he did. Was like he didn't admit to his, like you're talking about Kenny at the time.
Yeah, I actually felt sorry for him.
Yeah, he didn't.
He was in a rough spot.
He would not admit that he misplayed items, and had he done so, he probably would have done better, I think.
Yeah, but I don't think that's in it. That was in his personality, right? Like
no, but to be honest, no premier did. No premier ever came up. Like, who was the fellow? Quebec had a singular disaster with the way they were handling seniors' homes.
Oh, yeah.
And the infections in Quebec in there. Or the infection rate in there. Like, they had to call in the military, I recall. Wasn't it in Quebec?
Yeah.
Was it Legault who was premier at that time?
I can't remember.
I
try not to follow Quebec politics.
I don't recall a single
Je m'en fous.
I don't recall a single Quebec official, either in their public health or in their legislature, saying, "Yeah, we did that wrong, and we're not going to make that mistake again, or this is the change we're going to make in relation to this." They just refused to admit they had done anything, or not wrong as in a moral sense, that they had made a bad call, or that they had wrong information, or they had extrapolated incorrectly from the available information.
It depends. I think it depends on what you're talking about. With the example of their senior care, and I can't remember if their senior care.
But say just COVID
government
in general,
mandated.
COVID in general. I cannot think of a single public health official globally who came out and said, "Yeah, we did that wrong. We're going to change this policy now." Not one. I can't think of one.
Yeah, other than they never admitted to being wrong, but I guess Florida and Texas opened up much quicker than everyone else.
Yes, and in hindsight, that was the right decision.
Yeah.
So it wasn't a matter that they had anything wrong to be wrong about.
Yeah, they were always proactively like, we don't think this narrative is right.
I don't recall anybody in New York saying, "Yeah, we made a mistake." I don't recall anybody in California saying, "Yeah, we did that wrong." I don't recall anybody in Ontario, BC, Alberta, anybody saying, what? Locking down the schools was completely counterproductive, caused a lot of harm, and achieved nothing.
Other than the Swedes will rule the world because their kids are all a year ahead of everyone.
The only, what I am hearing is calls from that side of society which said, no, we must put our faith in the experts and really, really, really double down on those policies. There, I hear from them saying, well, we want a COVID amnesty. We want amnesty for the harm we caused in public policy. Yeah. That's the closest I'm seeing now to an admission of wrong, but that's, 2 years after the fact? Mm-hmm. Like, now we're closing that barn door way after the horses left.
Yeah, horse over the horizon, yeah.
See, for me, it's
still... And it's not an apology, it's a call for absolution.
Yeah.
To me, it's still an open question. Like, a lot of the statements you guys are making here, like, everything was wrong and... like these are all proven done deals.
Not everything.
I'm not convinced.
I didn't say everything. I said convinced. 3 very specific things. Lockdowns, school closures, masking. 3 very, very, very specific things. And I can say with 100% confidence, they were wrong. They were not just wrong, they were spectacularly wrong. Yeah. The harm caused by those lockdowns, particularly to the working class, was massive. It was massive. And then you go back to the idea of, like, say, the public sector. I'm going to expand that to the white-collar class who was able to work from home. Mm-hmm. They were completely unaware of the damage that they were causing to the working class.
Yeah.
And, in fact, they kind of thrived because now they cut down on their commutes. They didn't have the cost of having to go into the office. They were able to look after their children in their homes.
Yep.
So they were now, with the school closures, didn't bother them. The working class now had to find childcare because they couldn't work from home unless they lost their job, which caused a massive hardship in and of itself. And there was a refusal of the expert class and the affiliated white collar professional class to even consider that they were wrong. And by that third wave era, by the end of, say, around 2020, 21 in there, COVID policy had nothing to do with cutting down transmission rates and cutting down fatality rates. It was about making these peasants bend the knee.
No,
it was about obedience. No, it was about putting down. It was about, you do not challenge my authority as an expert. You do what you're told. Like that guy in Calgary, ice skating on a rink outside by himself, and he gets arrested. I mean, these are infamous examples. This guy in Ottawa who takes his dog out just to let his dog urinate in the parking lot by himself. He gets like a $400 ticket. You're telling me that wasn't about bending the knee? You're telling me that wasn't about the administrative state pushing back on resistance?
There's other examples, even in California. Like there was guys like paddleboarding by themselves off the off the beach. Sheriffs rock up in their boat and give them tickets.
You're telling me that wasn't about enforcing obedience? Okay. You're telling me that wasn't about power and control?
Okay, let me know when the rant's over, and I'll start an answer. Right. Was it? Possibly. Right? So every once in a while, you get officious, petty little bureaucrats. So that's one possibility. Right? Was this happening across the board? Probably not. Were there lots of people probably taking their dogs out, stepping outside in the parking lots? Yes, probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, so people got to live, right?
Right. The paddleboarding one, to me, is an interesting one, right? It's not about that one person, right? It is about, and don't jump on the next part of the statement right away, okay? It becomes, if one person is seen doing this without any consequences, then all of a sudden we might have a whole beach full of people, and that's what we're seeking to avoid, right? So it's not about the one guy out paddling on his own. Obviously, that's not a problem, right? It's we get back
about enforcing obedience. It wasn't about making sense. It wasn't about good policy.
Well, no,
it was. We know we've got a bad policy. We don't care.
No,
you do what you're told.
That's why I specified specifically regarding the paddleboard guy, right? If the policy, let's assume for a moment that the policy is sound, right?
That is an assumption. Okay.
Just for the sake of this conversation,
okay.
All right. The assumption of the policy is that the policy is sound, right? And we don't want people congregating because that generates transmission
I'm
of
on
the
your
disease.
page now.
Okay? Therefore, one guy out paddleboarding isn't a problem.
Right.
Right? But if one guy is out there not having consequences to his paddleboarding, then another guy will.
Okay.
He'll go, I feel like paddleboarding too.
I get you.
Next thing you know, we've got a whole beach full of people.
I get you.
All right. So now, I find it difficult to agree with the statements that these policies were like lockdown. I understand. Step back a bit. I understand the lockdown was horrendous economically, particularly for blue collar workers. I get it, right? I have yet to be convinced that the lockdown was pointless and ineffective, right? Because you cannot prove a negative, right? It will always be impossible to prove what harm may have been or not, may or may not have been prevented by undergoing the lockdown.
There's
I
two
would totally disagree with
two
that.
problems with your argument. Yeah, the first one is Sweden, and the second one is the BLM protests.
Yeah. The other thing is we could tell, like there's not a single jurisdiction on the planet where I could give you a map showing their case rates and say, okay, you tell me where they started lockdowns. There's not a single jurisdiction where you can do that. The transmission rates and the fatality rates were completely independent of lockdowns. And this is my point, that by the time the first and second wave had come and gone, like you said, the assumption was that, look, let's assume the policy is sound. And I think everyone did that in 2019. Because again, we didn't know what we were dealing with, and we took the precautionary principle. And I think we didn't see any of this resistance to the lockdowns when they first came out. But by the time we had gone over the first hump, like remember, flatten the curve. Well, the curve never flattened. It just burned itself out. And then when the second wave began to come, there's plenty of evidence out there. Everyone can see this for themselves. The lockdowns didn't help. So now we can't make the assumption that the policy is good. We have enough evidence, obvious. It's like the rising of the sun in the morning. The lockdowns are not helping. Now, whether or not they cause a lot of harm or a little bit of harm is kind of a moot point because they're not helping. So why are we still doing them? And that's why I'm saying it became about bending the knee. So we, the ruling class, have made a decision. We don't care whether or not it's right. We don't care whether or not it's wrong. We don't care if it's meeting the original intent. It's about protecting our position as rulers.
I don't see anything. I see no disconnect in any point. I don't see any enforcement of authority that was not directly linked to at least a belief that the policy was sound in its intent.
Even by third wave, even by Omicron?
Again, I do not have the data at this point to say...
You don't need data. You were around. You had your eyes open. Even in your own life. Could you see any benefit?
Again, I don't know. I can say this.
I don't know how you could know.
I don't think I caught COVID. If I did, I don't seem to have died from it, and I don't seem to have transmitted it to anyone who also died from it, right? Like, I can say those things, right? I do know that I stayed in lockdown for a certain amount of time. I do know that when mask mandates ended, both times, I was very happy, but I am not convinced that the lockdown did not achieve anything because if nothing else, as I said, there is no way to prove that. Now, in response to what you said, Steve, regarding Sweden, what is the comparative data, right? So are we talking simply that, okay, Sweden didn't have a lockdown, and I know there was a lot of politicization of the Swedish approach, and I started seeing stuff in the media from both sides saying this is a shining example of how it can be done.
And then this is an unmitigated disaster.
And they're just losing people hand over fist.
Yeah.
Right? So I saw stories from both sides.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, did they have a higher rate of fatality compared to other societies? And is this simply a matter of saying, the Swedes saying, we have an acceptable death rate that we're willing to live with?
As I recall, looking at the Johns Hopkins COVID tracker, and this is where some of the, the polarization of it. In comparison to Denmark and Norway, Sweden had worse numbers.
Okay.
In comparison to everywhere else in Europe, especially the major transit nodes, they had far better numbers.
Okay.
So it depends on who you want to compare them to.
Okay.
So
that raises some issue. What were the other Scandinavians doing? What were Denmark and Norway doing that Sweden and the rest of Europe weren't?
Well, Denmark and Norway weren't particularly different in their measures than the rest of Europe. Sweden was the only outlier.
Okay.
For example, Denmark and Norway had the same measures as England, but the UK had far worse numbers. Germany wasn't doing anything substantially different than, say, France, Denmark, and Holland, but they all had, and England had worse. The UK had worse numbers than everybody.
Right.
But England or the UK wasn't really doing anything that much different than, say, the Republic of Ireland. But the Republic of Ireland had much better numbers. I would say that a major factor in that is that the UK remained a major transit hub. People are coming and going, transiting in and out of the UK and Sweden and, say, Germany, much more than they are out of Denmark, Norway, and Ireland.
Well, I'd agree with that whole list except Sweden. I mean, who's traveling through Sweden?
You don't really go to Finland and Norway direct. You usually have to change over in Arlanda.
Okay, so
Sweden, all of the major export and land transportation networks generally go through Sweden to cross the Bornholm Strait.
Where are Sweden's numbers on here?
For example, if you're trucking something you're trucking something into Oslo,
so
you're going through Sweden.
Your key numbers here are the total cases per 1 million and deaths per 1 million.
Okay, where?
You see where the cursor is?
For the audience here, Steve's pulled up our worldmeters.info coronavirus numbers.
Tests, total tests, deaths,
and we're
total
trying
cases per million.
Have you
deaths
even got
million.
Sweden? Oh, yeah, you do. Yeah,
Yeah, right there.
Yep.
2,000 per million, 2,300 per million. Okay.
So where is your total per million? Tests per million, total tests, deaths per million, total cases per million,
Deaths
264. And then if you compare it, I don't know, is there somebody else? Okay, so holy shit, their actual numbers are actually less in Denmark. Denmark's just two above them. They're what, 544, 312?
So trying to give these numbers some context.
Deaths per million is about half of what Sweden's is, though.
But Sweden's population, Sweden did have...
But that's per million. That's deaths per million.
Yeah, they also had... there was some complication with their seniors really got a bad shot at it. But I'm also looking at total cases.
I look at deaths per cases. The deaths per cases ratio for Sweden is about 10%. For Denmark, it's way below that one.
But also, your deaths
0.2%.
Your deaths is going to have more to do with your medical practice. Once someone's caught the disease, it's not about your lockdown and your masks anymore. It's about how they're treated in hospital.
So Denmark.
So that's why I look at total cases. If you're going to evaluate effectiveness of mask, like prophylactic preventative measures, the only thing that's relevant is total cases. Deaths is irrelevant at that point because the guy's already got the disease.
Yeah.
Okay.
For example, if I get the disease and I receive better treatment and I survive, than a guy who has, say, doesn't have access to that treatment and he dies. That's here nor there with our preventative measures. Both of our preventative measures fail.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you're looking the per 1 million,
Yeah.
Sweden is 264,150 infections per 1 million population. Whereas Denmark is 544,312.
That's like double.
Per 1 million population.
Yeah.
And that's with measures.
Yeah, and they went the full, like they had much more stringent measures than Sweden did.
Where's Norway? Norway's down here.
Yeah, Finland is what, 263? So Finland's similar to Sweden.
Norway did okay.
Yeah, Norway's very similar to Sweden.
Yeah, 268,000.
Yeah, so I think there's Sweden is slightly better, just tiny bit.
Sweden's up 264.
Yeah, so essentially it's a wash.
Well, yeah, Sweden
it's a wash.
Sweden is in
so it's actually
Norway.
it's more the deaths.
Yeah, that's where Sweden's. Yeah. So probably an older population, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah, and Sweden does have a slightly older population.
And Sweden, compared to Canada, had roughly twice the case rate per million.
Where's Canada? Oops.
Scrolling down.
Yeah, unfortunately, this isn't an alphabetical.
There we are, near the bottom of the screen.
There we are, 4.6.
Yes, they had about. Well, not twice. about maybe.
No, they had half.
264 to 119.
So Sweden had half the cases we did per million.
No, we had half the cases.
We had half the cases per million as
Sweden did.
Oh, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong column.
Yeah, we had about half.
Covered.
So, but again, Sweden did better than the rest of Europe. I mean, most of Europe's up around the 400,000 mark. But that could also be explained by higher population densities.
Yeah, I would think,
Yeah, that could be. I mean, that would have an effect on it.
And like you said, transit points. Like, I'm betting Germany, points. Where's the UK on there?
Like, look at Thailand, where they had a fraction of what we had, but they don't have the same medical system that we did. They didn't have the same ability to kind of social organization to enforce measures, public health measures.
Yeah. UK was 356,000 per 165. Germany was 456,000 per 1 million total cases.
But actually, if you look at... actually, I was looking at this. Karen and I were looking at data on flights through Frankfurt.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Compared to the population that they've got there. It is like light years ahead of the volume of people that go in and out of Frankfurt is astounding compared to what you expect compared to going through Heathrow, because London's
it's a major transit hub,
megapolis, right?
Frankfurt is a hub for one of the biggest airline alliances. It's a European hub, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Frankfurt's a massive air traffic corridor.
Like Heathrow's like a sub hub for the same alliance.
Almost now. Yeah.
And then Schiphol is the other big one. Well, Schiphol and Charles de Gaulle. But Charles de Gaulle is only the hub for Air France.
Yeah.
And Schiphol is kind of the hub for KLM.
I've yet to look at taking a flight through CDG. Like, it's always Frankfurt.
It's an odd airport.
It's a what?
It's an odd airport.
Is it? A non-airport?
No, it's an odd airport.
Oh, odd airport.
Okay. I've been there. It's when we went to France a few years ago.
So
all right. So interesting data on Sweden.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what I mean. Like this sort of information was available midway through, like into the second wave. We were able to say for certain this measure is not having the desired effect. So let's re-examine. Why are we doing it? We know that it comes with costs. It comes with no benefits. So why are we doing it? And there was such resistance and pushback from those experts. I know, you don't question us.
Look at Australia's 436,000 per million.
And they went
and their lockdown was hardcore.
Yeah.
Especially, and now everybody said, "Oh, it's all Australia," and Australia's lockdowns were very much state dependent. Mm-hmm. And Victoria locked down the hardest core, and that's usually what made the news.
Yeah,
but
still,
the Northern Territory locked down pretty hardcore too.
Yeah, I mean, look at their numbers.
Where's New Zealand?
There's clearly no benefit.
And then I'll stop asking.
There's clearly no benefit to what Australia did. There you are.
New Zealand. Well, yeah, so
comparable.
454,000.
Very comparable
per 100, or almost 455,000 per million.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh.
Part of the problem was, I remember, I think it was Australian guy, Josh Zepps, kind of explained it. He said Australia was locking down more hardcore because they were kind of like a genetic mutation behind everybody.
In terms of the disease?
Yeah, and and so like the world had locked down, and then Australia didn't because they closed.
I think
they were able to wall
rely
off
on quarantine. Yeah,
yeah, they relied on quarantine a lot more of foreigners, and so they locked down international travel, but they didn't have internal lockdowns very hard.
Yeah.
Initially, and that got them through like the first wave without much difficulty.
Yeah.
I think New Zealand had kind of had a similar policy.
Yeah.
And then, but then once the second wave started to hit, they really hit them hard because they didn't have any accumulated immunity from the first wave that other countries
they
had.
just didn't have the same amount. Yeah.
So they didn't have the same exposure rate in the first rate as in the first wave is.
But like this is kind of where my point is about the backlash against experts and expertise manifested to the public health authorities, in that the people who are on the pointy end of these things, the people who were suffering because of these lockdowns, because of these mandates, whose children were facing, like particularly young children, who you could see the developmental delays, because of the reliance on masks and the lack of socialization, where they were cut off, from their mates because of school closures, like those big three things. The people who are literally counting the days until these mandates are lifted, it was demonstrable. It was obvious to them that we're not having the effect we wanted. And there was such resistance, whatever the motivation was, there was a massive amount of resistance from the people who created and enforced those policies. That this is where I think this is the genesis of where we're at today, where there is a suspicion, a mistrust of expertise, particularly within our public sector.
Well, I think as discussed, I mean, the anti-intellectual has been around for a while, and we're polarized on so many things. So here's a hypothetical back for you. Let's say by some miracle, some expert, some politician did apologize, did admit that they were wrong.
Yeah.
Yes. Listen.
Yeah, we were wrong.
We did this, and we did it for these reasons, and because it's our responsibility to provide.
Yeah. We did. We made the best decision we could with the information we had at the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And turns out it was overblown. Right now. How receptive are people going to be to that?
I think they would have been very receptive.
They would have been?
I think they would have been, yeah.
I think so too.
In the same way that...
It's a demonstration of good faith.
Yeah, because in the first wave, everybody was on board. Like there was massive buy-in because we all realized that, look, man, we've never done this before.
Yeah, this could be huge. Yeah.
This could be huge. We're all in this together.
Yeah.
There was a viral image of when the northern part of Italy locked down. Because
is this okay? Go ahead.
They were one of the first places in Europe that was really heavily hit, and it was, of course, very high density housing, and it was warm enough that people could open their windows, and people were singing a folk song to one another in this Italian neighborhood.
Yeah,
and it was an incredibly moving piece of video, right? There was that atmosphere, and people were willing to give the benefit of the doubt, like what you said. Like, look, let's not nickel and dime this. Let's not take an incremental wait and see approach. Because the consequences of failure are fatal. So let's really let's buy in. And so they embraced lockdowns. They embraced masking. They embraced social distancing because they were willing to give the benefit of the doubt. I think it was only after the second wave. It was really in full swing when people began to say, okay, you have enough data now. You have enough information.
See, that's what I don't know. Is there enough data? I know that 3 years on, we're looking at these numbers, and I'm looking at these, and I'm going, okay, seems legit, right?
What seems legit?
These numbers seem legit. Steve's point about Sweden kind of points out the fact that
it didn't hurt them. Let's put it this way. It didn't hurt them. Same thing with Florida.
Right.
Florida and Texas. Like, you can look at their case rates. It didn't hurt them.
Okay. So
yeah, like for the 50 U.S. states, Florida sits almost exactly in the middle as far as mortality
and case rates.
Yeah.
All right. So answering your question, because I heard it actually in a different way. Your question is, nobody came out and said we were wrong. We could have done this different.
Yeah. And we're going to change our policy.
And Steve has raised the very interesting hypothetical. What if the premier had done this, right? Had come out and said, okay, all right, this is what we know now. You can do X. I think actually in some ways he may have tried that along the way. But I think the whole...
Begrudgingly and half-heartedly.
The whole thing had gained a momentum all its own. I think that's part of it, again, that the hysteria was there, right? And so people were buying into it on one side, like wholeheartedly. Oh my God, we need to freak out. We're all going to die, man. And then on the other hand, you've got people who are like, this is all bullshit, and none of it being particularly informed, right? I would question whether, again, I don't think politically anyone can step up these days and say, I'm wrong about anything. And the other thing I heard you say is, and since no one said that, right? Now, and I guess that's kind of what I was answering, because if someone came out and admitted that now, right, they're not doing themselves any favor, right? What the credibility that they should get for that you've pointed out that...
Didn't I send you guys an article from a doctor who was issuing a mea culpa? Did I send you guys that?
I don't remember anything.
I thought I emailed you guys a link to it.
You might have. I can't remember.
Where it was a doctor who did say that. Yeah, like I was wrong. I was totally wrong about how
either you
I
said something or I've seen something recently. Yeah.
And he was saying that, we need to really re-examine how we do public health, how we become more receptive to feedback from patients and the public. That we really refused to modify. Like we were too arrogant. We were too sure of ourselves, and we lost the plot.
Well,
but mind you, he's not a political leader. He was a medical practitioner.
And the other thing that we're looking at is like Jay Bhattacharya has been making the rounds on the podcast network lately.
Yeah.
And it's like most of the data coming out lately seems to vindicate the signatures of the Great Barrington Declaration, right?
Yeah.
But they were so horrifically demonized.
Oh, were they ever?
Who's this?
The three authors of the Barrington Declaration.
I don't even know what that is.
I was just looking
for Lance's email. I can't find it.
Okay, Steve.
So it was a bunch of medical professionals.
Three prominent ones.
Bhattacharya
was one of them.
Jay Bhattacharya is the most prominent. I can't remember the other two.
You know what? You keep talking. I'm going to look that up.
Okay.
I will do that cover for you this time.
They convened a conference because it wasn't just them.
That's right.
Right. And
there were thousands of signatories to it.
Yeah,
they were the authors.
But they were the authors of it. But it was after they convened a conference of like a couple hundred people in a place called Great Barrington, Massachusetts, which is why it's called the Great Barrington Declaration. And they were looking at the data available at the time, and they were basically like, look, we need to protect the vulnerable and open up the rest of society, right? And who we're seeing as the vulnerable, people who are immunocompromised and the elderly mostly, right? And people with severe comorbidities. So those people need to focus our protection on those and let everybody else get back to their lives. Right? And they were excoriated for it. They've been talking lately about email, like, they issued the declaration, and like Jay Bhattacharya is not nobody, right? Like he's
a world-renowned.
Yeah, he's an economist, and I can't remember what his medical specialty is.
Okay, but I got it. The three primary authors: Sunetra Gupta,
right,
from the University of Oxford; Martin Kuldekorf from Harvard University; and Jay Bhattacharya
from
Stanford Medical.
Yeah.
I've never heard of any of these schools. Really?
Oxford.
Three guys.
Who the hell's from Oxford?
3 guys from those 3 places?
Like, come on, that's like Bob Jones University, man. Who the hell has heard of Harvard?
Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford.
In fairness, was it not
podunk schools and podunk towns?
Was it not who's that guy? William Buckley, who said he would sooner trust the first 400 names of the Boston telephone directory with public policy than the Harvard faculty.
Fair enough.
So okay, you're not out of school for saying that. Anyway, go on.
But anyway, yeah, they were scoring. Like they issued the declaration, and there's been a chain of emails that came out in congressional hearings, and it was like from Fauci to the directors of the NIH to all these people saying, "We got to cut these guys off the knees. This message can't get out." Basically, and so they just
but why? Why?
Because it competed with the narrative.
Yeah.
It was contrary to the official government narrative.
Okay.
The only, like the way it's, I'm not quoting anyone here. It just the way I recall it was the official narrative was the only acceptable form of reaction to COVID was vaccination.
Yeah,
that was it. You were not allowed to talk about treatment. We're not allowed to talk about drug therapies. We are not allowed to talk about respiratory therapies. We're not allowed to talk about focus protection. It was lockdown, mask, vaccination. That's it. And if you're either with us or if you're not with us, you're against us.
Yeah.
Because why?
Well, you've already rejected my thought on that. Let's Steve, you take a shot at him.
Authority for its own sake? No.
Yeah. It was hubris and arrogance. And they could not bring themselves to accept that they could be wrong.
And when Fauci went up in front of Congress, he testified in Congress and literally said the words, "I am science."
Yeah,
right. Like
that was telling.
That's a direct quote.
Telling.
Like that's not hyperbole. It's not made up. He literally said those words in front of Congress.
Yeah,
on television. And you're like, this guy be a guy with lacking in humility.
At what point of the proceedings was this? Like, how far into the pandemic?
That was 2021.
Was it?
Yeah.
Maybe
early 2022. No, I think it was 2021.
I don't know right off the top of my head. I've already closed that window, so I couldn't tell you when it was. But it was far enough into it. Yeah, it was about around second wave, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You raised some very convincing arguments. I mean,
I don't think either of us can give you a smoking gun saying these people are authoritarians and this is why. But it's just the trend of behavior.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the circumstantial evidence, whatever you want to call it, like this is
the lived experience of too many people just did not jive with the message coming out of the experts, right?
Well, if the indicators were there and it would have been possible to take the foot off the throats at some point sooner than it actually was.
Your words, not mine.
No, I chose them deliberately. Then it should have been done. And I can see, and I'm not seeking to be an apologist for any such behavior. I don't think it's authority for authority's sake. Maybe ego's involved. But just the challenge of leading people, especially, I can imagine someone.
Well, and then at the beginning of the pandemic, prior to the pandemic, it was the CDC's guidance for pandemic, the stuff that had been cooked up by the precursors to Fauci, right? Like, in case of pandemic, in your messaging, don't lie because you'll lose credibility.
Right.
What's the first thing Fauci said? Oh, we don't need masks.
Yeah.
When he thought we did. Yeah. And
that really didn't help. The flip-flopping on a lot of messages really didn't help.
Because he was worried about people going out, scooping up masks, and there wouldn't be any available for medical staff.
Okay.
Right? So almost literally the first message was a lie.
Okay.
Right? And intentionally so.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he admitted, we lied because we wanted to.
Okay, but the intent was a fair one.
Hang on. There's some...
If it was to prevent a run on masks...
The guidance that had been cooked up by the CDC recommendations for a pandemic that had been cooked up based on experience from the Spanish flu and the Hong Kong flu in the 60s.
Isn't there something about a road to hell being paved with something?
Oh, yeah.
I can't remember.
But the guidance that had been based on the experiences of previous pandemics, which hadn't been as severe as COVID, well, except for Spanish flu, that was pretty bad, was don't lie.
Yeah.
Never lie. Never lie. And the first thing they did was lie.
If he did it, well, okay, so he should have said, okay, we're going to need masks, but we need them for the medical staff first.
Yeah, it would have been a lot better.
They did, but they never tried. They just assumed there's going to be a run on masks.
Yeah. They just assumed the worst of the people. Okay. Just
now in their defense was this pre or post toilet paper? Like after everyone had done the run on toilet paper.
I don't know.
Right?
The run on toilet paper, the run on toilet paper was not as crazy as people thought.
No.
If you're not going to get any more toilet paper, how do you clean your ass?
Yes. And to be honest, I got a lot of sympathy for that because defecation is an incredibly personal and private thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's also risky.
Yeah. It's scary. Like when you think of being in that situation, how many people are deadly, deadly, deadly afraid of a situation where they get into a public bathroom stall, begin their bowel movement, and realize there's no toilet paper? For a lot of people, that's a terrifying.
What kind of psychopath uses a public toilet for defecation? That's just.
If you gotta go, buddy, you gotta go. If you got irritable bowel
syndrome, how about 10 million long haul truck drivers, asshole?
Yeah. You gotta go. You gotta go.
I can probably count on both my hands.
Well, you've been very fortunate. The number of
times I have shit in a public wall.
You want to know? This is bowel privilege.
It is.
First world fucking problem.
Yeah. So yeah,
look. If I go on the road for 3 days,
okay, you gotta go. You gotta go. This is what I'm saying. Like, I get that there was a run on toilet paper when there wasn't a run on cosmetics, when there wasn't a run on toothpaste, when there wasn't a run on, say, like any other, like soap. We didn't have a run on soap.
Okay.
But I can see why there was a run on toilet paper.
I'm just saying, okay, yes, it could have been handled better, right? I'm, specific to
one of the great
the first thing come out of your mouth is a lie. Okay.
Yeah. Bad call.
Bad fucking call.
Bad call.
Especially in this day and age. I will say, and again, I'm not trying to be an apologist for it, but I can easily see, like, okay, we've opened this can of worms. Mm-hmm. We've set forth this ball of hysteria, right? We can't have some clowns coming along and trying to create a moderate line. We got to ride this out, because otherwise we're not going to be able to keep control on people. If we admit that we were wrong, then people are... So, again, ego-based, poor judgment, right? And it is their job to maintain control, right? If the sense is that people are just going to fucking freak out and whatever. So, again, possibly poorly handled.
Possibly?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, those are the times we live in, right? Leadership ain't exactly dripping out of people's ears these days.
It's not growing on the trees.
And neither is, frankly, responsiveness to leadership, except in the worst possible ways, right? I mean, the only positive inspiration of leadership I can think of right now is Zelensky, right? There ain't no one else on the planet right now who's
of that stature, yeah.
Anyone who's got that much influence on people is generally a populist right now, and it's just ugly.
Do you see? I don't want to get sidetracked here, but I get the sense that you see populism as an inherently negative thing.
I do.
Why?
I think it appeals to the worst in people. Everything we've talked about, even today, right? The basest, ugliest things in people. What you were talking about as
how do you define populism?
I find anti-intellectualism is a big part of it. National chauvinism is a big part of it. Racial, ethnic, cultural chauvinism is a big part of it.
Can't someone be a populist and be none of those things?
For example, Bernie Sanders.
You think of him as a populist?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, but this is obviously because, which I'll share in a moment, my concept of populism is very different.
Interesting.
Like, to me, populism is someone who is focusing on an issue which resonates with the electorate, but is considered beyond the pale by the political establishment of that given jurisdiction.
Interesting.
So, for example, Bernie Sanders was the only guy who was really willing to go to bat for 100% publicly funded healthcare. In other words, the Canadian model. Mm-hmm. Nobody else in the Democratic Party was willing to go that far. Like, they thought, that's too much change too fast. I don't want to go that far. Sanders said, no, I think there's an appetite for it. I'm going to start talking about that. Mm-hmm. Even though that was, again, too far for the Democratic Party establishment. So I would say Bernie Sanders was a left-wing populist.
Here's a question.
So I don't see populism as inherently negative.
I have a question.
Sure.
That definition is especially the part of going against the
political
falling
orthodoxy.
outside
Yeah.
the political
The
mainstream.
political
Yeah,
mainstream.
yeah.
When Chamberlain resigned and Churchill took over, was Churchill a populist at the time?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the public mood in the UK at the time. He might have been, but was the political
Interesting.
establishment
I think
very much against a firm line?
It seemed
Hitler?
I think so.
He may well have been.
I think Chamberlain's attitude coming out of Munich was kind of the mainstream.
It's probably what Whitehall wanted, probably.
Within the government. But Churchill was definitely the contrarian at the time, right?
He might have been.
He was
very
always a
much might have
contrarian.
been.
He was a contrarian in the First War.
He was a professional contrarian, but
He was
Because,
contrarian.
as I recall, the mood of the Foreign Office, the mood of most of the House, if I'm not mistaken, was to avoid and the movers and the shakers of, say, the business captains of industry, academia, like people who do have the ears of elected government. Just judging from what I know of history in general, they were very much of the school avoid war at any cost.
yeah.
Like, they were so scarred by the experience of the First World War. They were to avoid war at any cost, and if that meant appeasement, they were willing to do that. So I would say, in this context, yes, Churchill was a populist. Because as I recall,
his ascension was pretty popular.
as I recall, Chamberlain was reviled by the electorate
yeah.
because of what he did. Like the whole idea of peace in our time.
Mm-hmm.
And then it fell apart.
And totally sold the checks down the river. That did not sell with the British public.
Well, no,
If
to the extent
memory serves.
to the extent that he died within months of that.
Yeah.
He was dead. I think, if
He was-
not in 39, in
yeah.
1940 for sure.
Yeah, he was a broken man.
Yeah,
after
he
that.
died. Like
I thought he lasted longer because
no,
he kept his
I'll look
seat,
that up.
and Churchill didn't kick him out of cabinet or anything like that. And my understanding is he and Churchill remained actually fairly.
Are you looking that up, or shall I look?
No,
that up? I will
you can
look
go.
that
You can go
up.
look it up. Sorry,
will
I don't know
look
why I
that
picked up
up.
the phone to look it up when I got a computer right here.
Yeah. Anyway, you go on. I will look that up.
But if I recall, I don't remember him. I don't think he died that. He might have died during the war, but I don't think he died right after that.
I thought it was 1940.
But
He died November 9th, 1940.
there you go.
So he lasted a year.
So he was, not even. He was leader, he was prime minister until May 1940 and leader of the Conservative Party until October 1940. He passed away 9 November 1940.
Oh wow.
Okay, so
My mistake.
He was PM
Wow.
until the fall of France then. You said he was prime minister
Spring of 1940.
May of 1940. So he was there through the
Yeah,
fall of
according
France.
to this article.
Churchill only stepped in.
Chamberlain
time-
announced the
in time for
declaration of
Dunkirk.
war on Germany 2 days
Yes, September 3rd.
2 days following the German invasion, and led the United Kingdom through the first 8 months of the war until his resignation as prime minister on 10 May. Well, there you go.
So I don't know. It's so you've asked a question now that we've moved the goalposts on the definition of populism once.
Mm-hmm.
throwing Churchill in there, I think
we're not moving the goalposts. So we're trying to.
I'm not saying there's any malice involved here.
Yeah. I'm just trying to come up with a definition.
Would he be a populist? I mean, he was certainly outside the mainstream.
Yeah.
And he certainly had the flair for leadership of his people. No one else could have led them and not surrendered.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. I'm just saying that this is how I define populism, is just someone who wants to talk about something that two conditions have to be met. Number one, it must be outside the political orthodoxy, not just mainstream, but the orthodoxy of the established political mainstream. And number two, it must resonate with the public.
So what I wonder about, I would say he wasn't a populist coming into it because he wouldn't have resonated with the people yet. It was only once he became prime minister and started leading them through the darkest years of the war that he became a populist. If that's the definition of populist we're using. And I'm forced to remove 100% negative connotations from the term populist.
Yeah, I just don't think populism by itself is necessarily
I don't think by itself
a purely
is a bad
negative thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you can argue for its negativity in the guise of Donald Trump or someone like that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, it can certainly. Yeah, exactly.
It can be negative. It can be positive. It's probably like a neutral.
I think it's kind of neither
or an agnostic force. Right.
He died of bowel cancer.
Oh.
So he probably was terminal for some time.
Yeah, probably.
Due to wartime security concerns. Oh no, that's his funeral. Okay. No, whether or not the diagnosis.
Interesting.
Going back to COVID numbers here, just as an aside.
Yeah.
This number for Pakistan, that's got to 100% be bullshit.
Well, I think, like, you look at Pakistan, you also look at Bangladesh's numbers. They're extremely low.
Oh, look at Vietnam.
Bangladesh, I get, because Bangladesh is an island.
And no, it's not.
No, sorry, I'm thinking Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Bangladesh
and also,
is East Pakistan.
Africa's numbers are very low.
Yeah.
I think there are two reasons for that. Those countries tend to have a much lower or a much younger population.
Yeah, much younger population.
The other thing is their ability to track is much lower.
Yeah.
I mean, for the vast majority, I think, of the COVID cases in Africa and Asia, they thought you just had the flu.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like their ability to test and confirm. They may have suspected much higher numbers, but their ability to test would have been very, very, very low.
Yeah, like their testing isn't the lowest. But I don't know, that number seems suspiciously low to me, given their density and their
you'd think, right? Like living in their high density cities. But their ability to actually confirm whether, I bet you if you had a stat for suspected number of cases, it'd probably be on par with everybody else. But their ability to actually nail it down and say, we can say without any doubt, we can say hard, concrete numbers, yes, with a capital Y. Well, their ability to do that is going to be very constrained. Very constrained.
Interesting.
It's not a case of, like, say, China's numbers where you just don't believe them because
you don't believe them.
They're not a good actor. It's a case where you got to say, well, look, I don't think they had the ability to collect reliable, accurate information, so you can't really hold that against them.
Yeah, Egypt's numbers are really low, too.
Yeah, and again,
that's China's numbers.
Yeah, exactly. We're China's numbers.
That's China's numbers.
The place where the disease originated. Oh, we're the lowest of everybody in the world.
Politically contrived bullshit. Whereas a place like Egypt or like Oman or Zambia,
I can understand Kenya being that low, being in line with Pakistan. Its population density is so low.
Yeah, so low, very young, and their ability to actually probably bring in tests to their rural population was probably very, very, very limited. So, you can't hold that against them. But in the frontier of how... something else has changed. Like when we talk about like the anti-intellectual backlash, what changed with COVID and is continuing with global warming is that in, say, the age of, say, like Bush 1, Bush 2, the 90s, earlier, this sort of thing, there were experts and intellectuals, and they were saying their stuff, but they didn't have the ability to impose those opinions on the population. That changed with COVID. And that's changing with global warming. In that governments are listening to these experts and imposing these policies on the common people, and it's causing them harm. And this is where, this is part of the conflict. In that, if some academic, some intellectual wants to say, this is my opinion, okay, fine, that's your opinion. But when they start saying, I'm going to make you live according to my opinion, now we've got a problem, especially when the effect is not benign. Now we got a problem.
You're measuring the effect, and we had this conversation about the mythical asteroid.
Yep.
Heading for the Earth, right?
Yep.
What do we do about that? Who gives a shit about anybody's job now?
But what if we don't know if the asteroid really exists? What if you got some guys who say the asteroid's out there and it's coming, and then you get other guys who say no, there is no asteroid out there.
Okay, let's
there's an asteroid out there, but it's the size of a snowball.
Okay, let's take it as givens that it's the size of a football stadium.
We can't.
And it does exist.
Again, that's okay. If it was that situation and it was understandable to all, we would be having this discussion. But the fact that it's not a football stadium, there's the preconditions you're supposing.
I think a football stadium-sized asteroid is actually pretty easy to deal with.
It might be, but that's not this is the crux of the matter. Is that we can't say with certainty that it's a real and pressing threat, every bit as dangerous as the experts are saying, or some of the experts, not all the experts.
Okay.
John Christie, that's the name of the guy I was thinking of.
Alabama?
From University of Alabama, Huntsville, who is the leading authority. I can't remember the name of his research partner, and I should, because they're equal collaborators.
Well, he's going to be pissed at you.
Yeah, he should be, because it's my fault for not remembering his name.
This will get back to him, obviously.
The guys who...
Before I even uploaded.
Yeah. You remember Chrissy's name? You can remember mine?
Yeah. So, their data from satellites saying that, there's been essentially no real warming since the turn of the century. And of course, this was the whole point of the ClimateGate scandal coming out of the University of East Anglia and the Climactic Research Unit, saying that, we got a way to, the phrase was, hide the decline. In the emails, Michael Mann was one of the guys. The head of the CRU at the time resigned.
Yeah,
and as a result of the scandal,
he was about the only one though.
But because it's true,
there wasn't a lot of accountability to come out of that scandal.
Most of them doubled down, like Michael Mann.
Yeah.
But again, this is part of the problem in that you've got researchers like and titans in their field, like Richard Linson, Judith Curry, William Hapner, who are all saying that either they're saying the warming is of such a small amount that this is not an existential crisis. And the things that we are doing, mirroring COVID, the mitigation measures we're taking are going to cause more harm than if we had done nothing. And so that's why you can't take it as a given that, the asteroid's real and it's coming. We have to, for that comparison to be complete, we'd have to say, we don't know if the asteroid is really coming.
Okay.
Or there's not enough agreement as to whether or not the asteroid is.
Have you guys seen the movie Don't Look Up?
No.
I've seen parts of it.
But I've seen enough clips of it to know what the story is.
Well, we're talking about the plot of it here. So.
It's basically the movie is kind of taking your idea and
it got so annoying to watch after a while. I was like, ugh.
I didn't mind it. I was able to sit through the whole thing.
I couldn't sit through the whole thing.
But it was definitely preachy.
It was definitely preachy.
Yeah. And that was just it. It was so annoyingly so. It's I get it.
It's very condescending.
You're the good guy.
Yeah.
She's the bad guy.
Yeah.
Ridiculously, two-dimensionally so.
Yeah, everything. There was no well-developed characters in it at all.
Let me rephrase the question then. What about the hypothetical when the asteroid is coming or the pandemic is real and we don't listen to the experts, right? And the reason I'm asking this is, okay, how do we properly gauge accurately an extinction level event without at least some trust in experts, right? Like someone's got to tell us that the asteroid is coming. And if our knee-jerk reaction is off, A, I don't want to hear this message, and B, he's an egghead and I don't believe experts anymore.
Because we would need those experts, those initial forecasters, to be correct about their initial first stage predictions. That would have to happen. And in the case of COVID, it didn't. Like, for example, we all know about the Imperial College study that said we were going to be drowning in bodies in the first 90 days. And of course, this was the what was his name? Help me out. He was a British guy. Ian Ferguson.
Oh,
I think it was. Anyway, he was the researcher who is known for hyperbole. Like when we look at his track record, he is known for making really crazy, radical predictions. But he was the primary author behind the Imperial College study that was really doom and gloom, which inspired a lot of our initial reaction to it. Like with global warming, if the initial projections that were made in the 1990s had actually come to pass, then I think, we wouldn't have the debate that we do now. The fact that, again, like COVID, they weren't just wrong, they were completely wrong. Like they weren't even within a cab ride of being true. You had guys like Hansen talking about how Manhattan was going to be under, like the first 5 blocks of Manhattan were going to be underwater by 2018. How the glaciers on the Himalayas were going to be gone. How they had to change the signs in Glacier National Park because the ones that they made 25 years ago, the visitors' information signs, were predicting that the glaciers were going to be gone by around 2020. And they were, oh, geez, we better change that because they weren't gone. If those initial predictions had been less hyperbolic, if they had been more accurate, then I think there would be much better buy-in.
Well, yeah, I mean, on the one hand,
and they lied. There was before I let you reply. We now know that John Hansen, is his first name John?
From Goddard?
Yes.
Robert,
yes, that
Robert
guy.
isn't it?
That fella. Anyway, I don't. James Hansen.
James Hansen. Sorry,
Hansen. Yes. If he worked in pharmaceuticals and had fraudulent data and manipulated data sets like that, if he worked in like medications, he'd be in jail. He would be in jail for it's only because he worked in a theoretical scientific bodies in the public sector all his life that guy never faced public prosecution for the amount of fraudulent data he published, how he manipulated fact sets. Like it's shocking what that guy did. That was a huge part of it. People don't like it when public officials lie for the sake of an agenda. That was also a huge factor. Like we talked about with Fauci, how he really shot himself in the foot by lying right out of the hack. Well, so did a lot of the global warming advocates. But they lied in the 1990s. And if we take the presupposition that, this is a real crisis, and it does take real and serious measures, they're totally undermined by those mistakes that were made 30 years ago.
What's the point in lying about climate change, in the 1990s? Like, what? Are you just looking to fuck over the petroleum industry? Or?
No, because climate change, I think, was seen by a lot of people. Like, say, for example, commentators like David Suzuki has been pretty candid on this, saying that and Naomi Klein. Climate change is a way to get to a better world, in that a world without capitalism, a world without private property, a world with a more equitable, like in their view, a more equitable, just system. Climate change is a way we can achieve that. And if that means maybe we have to be a little cavalier with the facts in terms of the science of the climate, then that's a price that they are willing to pay.
They have not been quoted as saying this.
I'm going to find you a couple of quotes because there are guys who have said that. Now, I don't know if they were, all of them were men of science or some of them were related science, like Suzuki, who's a geneticist. He's not an atmospheric fellow, but he's said statements to in that neighborhood kind of thing. I'm just going to do a quick search. Is it okay to lie about climate change? And then while I'm looking that up, I'll let you guys have the floor.
I've had enough floor, I think, for tonight.
It's been a lot of floor. This thing is gonna be, by the time we put the two clips together, it's gonna be almost 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
well, we could easily split it. We could easily split it into two.
That's a good point. But that doesn't mean we're not coming back in 2 weeks, folks.
Yeah,
that's right.
I would have to edit it somewhere in the middle of the second one because we start when we came back to the second stint. We
went back to Big Hemi.
We went back to Big Hemi and the Ram. The Ram.
Yeah, but it wasn't too far after that when you. Okay. We wait with bated breath.
No.
All right.
I used wrong search engine. But anyway.
Homework for next time.
Yeah, I guess. But again, I think
don't use Bing.
That does. No, I'm using DuckDuckGo, which is an imperfect search engine. But I think that's part of it, in that people had guys like James Hansen. Yeah, they had a more noble, in their mind, a more noble cause. Like they're looking for a better society. And if that means maybe you are omitting certain things, or maybe you're massaging the data a little bit, which he most certainly did, for the purpose of what climate mitigation policies could achieve in the long run. And Naomi Klein has absolutely said that what climate change is really about is getting rid of capitalism. Greta Thunberg has said this quite recently, that we need to rethink society, that we're never going to beat climate change until we get rid of capitalism. That, really, climate change is just one part of a broader societal goal, like the whole Build Back Better, the whole, another way it is expressed is
Great Reset?
The Great Reset, yes. That this is just really, in the big cosmic scheme of things, it's a means to an end. So they do
let
have...
me get this straight. You're speaking about the abolition of capitalism like it's a bad thing.
Yes. But to them, it's a good thing. The other side of it...
Just
and
being
this
clear.
Yeah, just nailing that down. The other side of it, and when we go back to the problem with experts maybe being wrong, is that, let's say, my field is biology, and I study, say, smaller life forms, say like amphibious life forms and insect life forms in the boreal forest. And I'm trying to run a lab. Like Steve's my colleague here. We've got a lab, and we're on a shoestring budget in some, like say a moderate side, like University of Lethbridge. Like we're not part of a great big massive institution. Okay, we have to really watch our pennies. We have 4 employees who we have worked with and consider as colleagues for the last 20 years, whose jobs and mortgages are dependent upon our lab staying open. We have 4 graduate students. The turnover is every 4 years, but still these students need our lab in order to finish their theses. So we're affecting their future careers. So we need to keep this thing open, and we're competing for funding. Unfortunately, there is only one source of funding. All scientific research is ultimately paid for by the government. I mean, unless you're in a very, very narrow field of chemistry or pharmaceuticals, all research in this field comes from, it's a government monopoly. So if I'm going to get funding, if I'm going to ask, say, look, we want to do a study on how does sunlight penetrating the forest canopy affect life down at, say, ground level, I'm not going to get a lot of funding for that. But if I produce a study that says, hey, Government of Canada, I want money to study how climate change negatively affects the life on the ground. If I say I want to determine whether or not it has a negative effect, I might not get money. If I say I want to see, like as my preconceived conclusion, that climate change is real, it is negative, and it's going to have a negative effect on the biome on the forest floor, I'm going to get funding. So I have an interest in promoting this narrative. And when you look at the history of science, since basically the professionalization of science, the government monopoly on science since about 1890, you see this over and over again, where an orthodoxy comes into play because it meets the preconceived notion of the government bureaucrats writing the checks, and in order to protect their own financial situation, academics must buy into that narrative. And they hope that, like, maybe their real interest is understanding just how organisms on the forest floor live. We're going to try and eke that out as a byproduct of the greater study. So I ask for $100,000 to study climate change. I'm going to use $15,000 of that to actually really look at what I want to know. Unfortunately, the other $85,000 is going to have to go to produce some kind of claptrap on climate change, because that's the cost of doing business. So that is another reason why, why would you falsify data? Why would you go to all this effort to produce a finding on something that you yourself are not entirely convinced of? Well, because that's what's going to keep my lab open. It's going to keep my colleagues employed. That's what's going to allow my 4 graduate students to finish their PhDs.
All right. Well, I'm going to take what you said. I'm going to cogitate on it.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily going to walk back in here wearing a tinfoil hat next time we get together.
Suede is open, though.
In answer to Steve's question, I don't think we've come close to answering whether or not we should listen to experts. I think actually the answer to that question, as we've discussed it, is how to define the parameters of how and when to have the discussion that we bring the experts into and for.
And also, yep, I'm happy with it.
Well, considering we didn't know what we were going to talk about when we got here.
We found a lot to talk about.
Holy shit.
Yep, we covered some ground.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Ciao.